I'm honestly not sure yet because I can't do Pathfinder because I'll just get lost in that. I don't know. Is there any? I don't know if I can do a request. I may not have it installed, but um, okay. Let's see what's the oldest thing I've installed right now. Always. I can. I can. Do I have Half-Life One convene? Because that I had a disc for. I don't know if I ever actually bought it on Steam. But I do have here. Here. Nah, we'll still do Half-Life, and we'll do old school Half-Life. We're just gonna do the Opposing Force expansion. Yeah, yeah. I'm kind of cheating the system there if I do it like that. Um, yeah, no, it's good. Um, yeah, pretty much. Yeah, you do. Huh. Uh,
Yeah.
okay. No, I
Whoa,
just
whoa.
was.
Who am I getting feedback with?
You're gonna want to mute my stream
Oh, okay.
because I
What
can't.
it
The
is?
stream can hear us.
Yeah, because I had the headset on, but then the stream wasn't picking up any of my computer audio, and I was like, I don't know how to fix that right now, so I'm just gonna do this. So yeah, just mute my stream, and because I record.
You are muted.
Okay, cool, and
Any more feedback? No.
No, it's good.
No, we're good.
okay, perfect.
Cool.
Everything should be good then. Hey, look at that! A game from 25 years ago installed in a minute. Crazy.
You just play them on a browser at this point. They're so small.
Yeah,
Basically.
it's crazy. All right. Let's get the game started here. Okay.
Oh boy.
Yeah. Okay. While I figure out the dimensions of this, since Dan, you came up with the topic for today, would you like to lead us off?
Oh god.
Introduce your topic for the world, and then I guess I'll leave it up to you how if you want to like just jump in and answer the question directly, or if you wanted to take a different format. But at the very least, you can go ahead and introduce what we'll be talking about.
And just so I remember. Yeah, okay. So, what's up? I'm Dan. Everyone, welcome to Just Your Average Gaming Podcast, number
Nine.
episode 9. Yeah, for sure. Today we're going to be talking about a very broad subject. Old versus new games. Which are better? Did we lose anything? And what have we gained, basically? I guess the first question is, what would you guys define as an old game at this point?
I think the easiest way to cut it up would be old as anything from the 2D era. And then modern would be 3D era. So anything before PlayStation. I'm not including N64 in 3D era. Just because the limitations of N64.
I mean, that was kind of the pioneer of the 3D era, though, as a console.
The thing about the Nintendo 64 is that it still used a lot of old school. Like the 3D was almost as much of a gimmick at that time as it was in something like Doom in the good old days, where it's more often than not an illusion of 3D, or the 3D is there just for like designing environments, but the existence of only the one control stick meant that 3D was more often than not just visual more than game space. I'm thinking like GoldenEye, where you can't really aim your gun up and down. Everything's pretty much going to be on the same level as you. Or if you have to go down staircase, you'll have to wait till you're down the staircase to shoot at the people that are downstairs. It's really the PlayStation with the... And it's not even like early PlayStation. It's like a little later down the life of PlayStation when they introduced the controller with 2 joysticks that 3D really became like the workhorse of the video game industry. That's where I draw the line. I don't know
Play-
if you guys agree, but
I would put it a little later, but also PlayStation 1 and N64 are the same generation, despite PlayStation having introduced dual analog. I don't know. Maybe it honestly, it's kind of subjective here because you have to draw the line, I guess, at a certain generation. I just feel more comfortable qualifying GameCube, PS2, Xbox original as like that's the cutoff for me for like where I would consider things old. I think PS3, PS4, PS5, which obviously not PS5, but like PS4 is still kind of around. PS3 is kind of obsolete. So anything obsolete, like PS3 is recently becoming completely obsolete. So I would
yeah,
consider
Sony
PS2
pulled
an
the plug
earlier.
recently.
Yeah, so I say like PS2 is a clean cut for me, whereas PS3 and 360 era soon will also join that. But for me, I'm more comfortable calling PS2 since that's also the generation that Half-Life 1 actually even came out on. There was like Half-Life Source on PS2.
Yeah, well, yeah. There was
Yeah, the
like,
orange box and the original Xbox. Yeah.
no, Orange Box was 360.
I'm pretty sure it was for the Duke.
No.
I mean, let me figure that out. But
No, it's no Jacob's right. It was early 360 era.
Yeah, it was
It was on
2007.
PS3 as well.
It was 2007.
oh yeah, no, you're right. Never mind.
It's right at the
If
turning
it's
point.
Half-Life
Yeah.
related, Dan, you can just take my word for it.
That's a fair point.
I'll take your word for Zelda stuff. Just take my word for Half-Life stuff.
Oh, you gotta take my word for Zelda stuff. Interesting.
Hold on, my headphones are dying. Hold on.
Don't
You
do
guys
that.
can keep talking.
Yeah, Jacob. What about you? What's your old era considered?
All right. Well, definitely
I mean,
not.
obviously, you're playing something that many people would be, consider old.
Well, not Louis apparently.
Right?
So I definitely don't go as far back as he does for that. I think for me, my turning point between like modern and old school is the onset of the HD era. So 360 and PS3 is the beginning of modern gaming for me. And
I'm gonna ask you one question.
I will give you maybe many answers.
Why HD? What is it about HD that draws it as a good cutoff point?
Because I think with the arrival of HD, it began a shift in focus as far as the best things to focus on in developing a game. It also, I feel like around that time is where we have that loss of creativity and taking risks. Because of the advent of HD, it's the beginning of when you could start to seriously sell games on their visuals. As opposed to before where, yeah, okay, sure, at the time, Ocarina of Time like looked amazing, and even like stuff like Half-Life, but it was still never could be the selling point, because you could always look at like television or movies, even back then when their TVs weren't as nice, and still be like, wow, this obviously visually doesn't measure up, but it plays so well, all that stuff. And yeah, so I think it's around that era where we saw the shift more towards focusing on visuals, and that's where we started to lose things, at least in the AAA market.
Online as well, eh? Like that generation really like put they pioneered it, but not really. I guess the generation before had online, but it's really like HD, PS3, 360 generation that like put multiplayer and online at the forefront with digital
Yeah.
downloads.
That too is
Yeah,
another
stuff like that.
aspect. So yeah, you had Xbox Live on on the Duke, but it only online services were still like in their infancy as far as consoles were concerned then, and it was the 360 era that really propelled Xbox Live into what it is, what it's become.
Yeah, you kind of, to be honest, you kind of took the words out of my mouth. I do agree that modern gaming certainly started at the HD era, so like 360, PS3 era. I mean, Nintendo's always been chugging along with, I guess that was the Wii generation, right?
Yeah.
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 So yeah, they're doing what they do. And like Nintendo, I feel like can still maintain that they're making games for the sake of games. Whereas, yes, I do agree that at a certain point, it kind of stopped feeling like they were trying to deliver a gameplay experience, and they started focusing more on the cinematic way that they can kind of push their stories forward and present them in such a way that's visually appealing, not just to someone who like plays games because they enjoy the mechanical aspect of playing a video game, but also people who like to watch movies. You know, like how many Avengers games sold consoles because the parents were like, oh well, the kids watch all the Marvel movies, maybe like, you know, this is something they can get into, and then it just bridges that gap. And you know, it's easier for them to process if it looks better, if it looks more relatable. Whereas you show them the same 16-bit thing and they can't really see it as anything more than just a kind of like a flash in a pan, like just some you know, non-tantalizing experience. Yeah, I'm gonna have to disagree with you, Louis, on the N64 still being considered 2D. I will agree that most of it can certainly feel that way, in the sense that, you know, it is very linear in a lot of what it does, GoldenEye specifically. But then look to like their flagship game, Mario 64. You can't tell me that had nothing to do with 3D. Like the entire
that was a
you're
pioneer of
mechanics, everything else behind it
a little my
was
argument. You're
3D oriented.
misconstruing a little my argument, and it may be because I didn't explain myself very
that's
well.
my stance on that.
But the idea behind N64 still
Jacob,
being
what's
considered classic gaming for me
Going down.
isn't so much
shaking.
because of
Getting all like
3D
filled.
not being present. It's more about 3D not being the main appeal always. It was still kind of, because 3D was a thing in Super Nintendo. If you play the old Star Fox, the Star Fox cartridge had a special chip to produce something like 16 polygons of 3-dimension space. So 3D's been a thing in gaming for a while. The thing about PlayStation is that the minute it incepted the controller with the 2 joystick, exploring 3D environments became virtually limitless as to what you could do with this space, because all 3 axes could be explored conveniently all at once. Which is something the N64, yes, it had the C buttons that allowed you to manipulate the camera, like to an extent with some degree of precision, but not to the degree of precision that you could on a DualShock controller. And I think putting the bar at PlayStation 2 puts it just a little too far, because the trends that we're observing in gaming being focused on visual experiences is something that started in the PlayStation 1 game. If you read a lot of the marketing for PlayStation 1 titles, especially the later titles in the PlayStation 1 cycle, you'll see that that conversation of next-gen graphics and all of that was already well in play. It was in play in the 16-bit era, but it was very, very, very loud in the PlayStation days.
Like, I even understand that, and I agree, but I think that even the standard of all of what that even means, like what cinematic even meant in that generation, is so different than what it even became later. Making a cutoff here, like they're both old. They're both like at least 3 generations behind. So like that's still like a decent amount of time. I mean, PS2, like PS3 came out what, like 2007?
Yeah.
So that's like 14 years ago. So that was that was pretty much the end of, like, the PS2 era was on its decline right after that, obviously. So yeah, some games still came out, but it was pretty much over. So basically, it's almost about 15 years ago that we were really in the middle of that. And to me, in a medium that's like really young, like 40-something years old, at least on a mass scale, I think that 15 years is a ton of time. That's more than like 25%.
It's almost half its life cycle. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a huge amount. So it's like it's growing so rapidly that, like, you could go as far as to say PS3 is. I wouldn't, but like it's you could say PS3 is even old, and like I'm sure there's people nowadays who would look at, like, I don't know, Resistance: Fall of Man, and think like, wow, like that is an old game, or like Halo 3 seems like really long ago. So it's a matter of perspective. I think that it's hard to really draw a line, because we're talking from our own personal experiences as well as like what seems like a good cutoff point, but it's kind of hard, like, unless we're talking about like really modern versus everything else. Like we're talking about like the present versus everything before 2018 or something. But I don't know. It's hard to draw a line.
I feel like we are also a little bit drawing the line in a place that's convenient for the rest of our argument, which isn't always the best thing to do, but I mean, it's a way to do it.
Well, I mean, that argument is, what makes you choose that part, I guess. Like, if you don't have an argument behind your stance, then I guess why do you have a stance?
Yeah, but if all of your arguments build on top of each other, then you're formulating a circular argument and you're not elaborating anything.
Maybe.
Basically my argument stands that it's not HD that changed the way gaming was approached, it's 3D. Like in a broader sense. Because that was basically it was the last frontier. It was the last thing that we could incept, technologically speaking, to open up possibilities. From there, things just improved. So I tried to find a hard cutoff point that's technical and then build from there. And inception of 3D as being the mainstream thing to do is where I'm drawing the line.
All right.
Well, I mean, we could also operate with different cutoffs. Like we're allowed to, like,
Of
yeah.
course.
So I like, whereas maybe I don't have the same as you. I understand your perspective and why you're saying that, and that'll inform your stance later, like we were saying. So, but I respect it. I understand, and I think about that a lot too. Like, why? Where did we enter like our current era? And like, yeah, 3D. My only issue with that, there's like, for me at least, complications wise, is like I really. For one, aside from like, I don't know, augmented reality and virtual reality, I don't really see how else if we're ever gonna really change from there. Like I have a hard time seeing that, but it's hard to see the future. And secondly, we still technically have 2D games as well. But yes, I get that 3D is the standard. So it's games are a messy multimedia combination. So there's
Because
so
it's
many.
not like movies. We can't just look at like the definition of the cameras they were using or the quality of the SFX that they were using as kind of like a way to cut off some of the eras. Like the move from film to digital was huge in the movie industry, and the same can be said about moving from tape to digital in the music industry or the camera industry, the photography industry. So like I'm starting to think like, okay, what is it about video game? Like, what sense did our video games not find a way to titillate yet? And I mean, other than ultimate haptic feedback and like almost like smell feedback, like we've got it pretty much locked down because we're exploring sounds in about as high a definition as you could ever emulate. We're exploring space in about as high a definition as your eyes can see, like to the point where we're strapping screens to our very eyes and then just calling that VR, I guess. But like there isn't much more that can be done for us to play with other than to add dimensions. But idle game add the fourth dimension where it's like sometimes you just gotta let the game play out for 15 hours while you're doing something else. So it's like I don't see what else could be added to delineate like a postmodern era. Like what's gonna be next for us other than improvements in the technology, like of things that we're already doing. I don't see anything happening.
Well, I mean, motion.
But again,
people would have argued like motion controls at a time, but even though that was more of a gimmick that didn't quite catch on, VR still employs it to some degree, and VR is more of like a parallel. Rather, people think that like, oh, we'll have everything will turn to VR, and I never see that happening.
I disagree.
Yeah, there's no way. It's a parallel. It's like mobile games. Mobile games don't destroy console games or PC games. It's just they live in tandem. And I think that the same goes for VR. It's like it'll exist alongside. They'll all coexist as different ecosystems for games. But anyways, the point being that like, yeah. So you're basically your technological advancement that you're using as a cutoff point, like film to digital, like film to video. In movies is 2D to 3D. So the jump from the Super Nintendo era to the N64 era.
Yeah, basically.
Okay. Danny, are you still there?
Yes, I am. I was having some mic issues at some point.
Oh my god, it's issues day. I'm late today.
I mean, right? God, it's not meant to be.
My headphones were fine, and then we're like, all right, we're starting. And then one of the sides of my headphones just went, well, I'm dipping. Bye.
Actually, I have something else to do. Bye.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, like dying. My favorite pair of headphones is dying. Rest in peace.
Okay, so here we'll circle around to all that stuff, but I'll ask a very simple question: which era of gaming do you prefer? and why? Obviously.
Like the old or the new, you mean?
So like,
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
guess
to you,
each of us
what's
kind
dear
of
to your
looks at our
heart?
own.
Yeah, your
cutoff
own
point and-
personal, like, we've
your
already at this
bias?
point identified what we each personally see as, like, old and new gaming. Which do you, based off of that perception, prefer, and why?
Okay.
Before anybody answers, I'll just say the first question we answered pretty much gives a lot of hints as to which era people prefer. In my opinion, I think hearing the answers is always going to be
Well,
more interesting.
Then let's
but I
make a
think
little
it's
game
nice
out of
tell.
it. Let's make a
Sure.
little game out of it. We can guess.
I'm down. I'm
All
down.
right. So who wants? First, we'll go one at a time. Who? Julian, were you about to chime in? Do you have like your answer ready?
I'm pretty sure I have my answer.
Okay. So
ready, yeah.
so let's guess what his answer is going to be,
Ah,
and then he'll dive into it.
I think it's PS2.
Oh, we're doing by generation?
Well, we could do by generation, or we can do from before or after our cutoff point.
Okay, but like before, after. Yeah,
yeah, let's
that's
keep
why
it simple at
Yeah,
before
let's
or
keep
after.
before or after
Leave
the cutoff
generations
point. So
yeah.
for Julian, you were saying your cutoff point was like
He was putting it at what HD graphics?
It's PS2. It was the PS2
yeah.
is considered old. It's like that's the newest of
It's
the
the-
old.
Okay. Yeah. So that's what I would say is your preference.
so
That's where
PS3
I
is kind
think your
of
preference
so
is.
similar to
I think his preference lies after, simply because I know he has a very solid affiliation with the Bioshock games, and dreams of one day making his own futuristic FPS. So that's my assessment.
Jacob?
yeah. I'm gonna go with modern as well
Yeah.
for similar reasons. That and also I think you appreciate a lot of what is being done in the industry today. Yeah. So that's my answer. And Louis, what do you think?
I think it's PS2.
So old.
I think like right at that fringe, right around where he set that line, end of life PS2, beginning of life PS3, is where his preference would be, because it's a nice runaway from the quality going up, then the generation changing, then a steady going up, and then that like creeping nostalgia that kind of pulls back on enjoyment, which is like we had it better in the old days, which slowly starts the curve down. But then again, you guys had a good point that he does like a lot of what's modern in the industry, so I very well could be wrong.
Well, Julian.
Okay. So, I'll
Drumroll,
reveal it.
please.
So,
Yeah.
yes, it is the more modern stuff. It isn't the older stuff, and it's interesting to hear Louis' reasoning because I'm very conscious of that exact thing that you just mentioned, which was like the nostalgia. Because if I look at my games, because I'm staring at them right now, if I look at my old games, I could see like, oh, I have so many good memories with this game, but that's the thing. It's easy to get like rose tinted glasses and think that everything was perfect. I'm not saying there were no sacrifices made to get to modern gaming, and there are things we lost along the way. But I think the overall what we've got, what we've reaped from newer age gaming is stuff that I prefer if I have to hold them against each other. I have more arguments I'll bring up later because I think it'll be more relevant later. But basically, I think that we're capable of more in the AAA market. So we're capable of creating more involved, immersive experiences, and then the indie market is there for experimental and often emotional experiences as well. Like I said earlier, at the same time, I find that I think nostalgia informs my opinion of old too much, and would maybe force me to overlook some glaring issues because, like you said, it's easy to look and say, "Oh, the good old days." Like I remember when I used to play Metroid Prime. That was the peak of gaming. It's like, yeah, Metroid Prime was good.
Super Mario,
Mario Kart 64, Mario 64, Ocarina of Time. It's easy to look at that stuff and say like, "Oh, yeah, that was brilliant," and it was brilliant at the time. But if you look at all the other jumps we've made, you have to be fair, and it's hard to be fair and objective when you have so many emotions tied to it, especially growing up with games, But that's my stance. We can move on to someone else's. We can guess someone else now.
Does anyone want to volunteer or?
I'm gonna say that Louis
Yeah.
prefers the older generation before the implementation, and thus focus on 3D.
Interesting.
I
So
want to
hard
say
with
the
Louis
same
though,
thing.
because his old is so old that there's so much, I don't know.
So much after,
Yeah,
like after an N64, PS1 era, it's like all of PlayStation exists. Like 5 eras of PlayStation exist after.
Bloodborne exists,
yeah.
Oh fuck!
The entire Soulsborne series, for that matter.
Oh shit!
Then
Yeah,
again, that
that's really
entire
modern.
series is modern, so
Mm-hmm.
with obviously old school sensibilities, but it is definitely modern.
Kingsfield or even Kingsfield is considered new
Um,
shit. Okay.
I don't know.
I don't know.
I'm gonna play the odds and say modern, just because there's so much in his category of modern.
It's hard. It's hard because I can expect a lot of Louis to have a lot of positive things to say about the older generations, especially 2D era, like Super Nintendo and Genesis. I feel like that's such a good era, and I'm sure Louis has appreciation for that. But like you said, oh man, Soulsborne era, just Soulsborne as a franchise. Oh, I know how much love Louis has for Bloodborne specifically. So, I'm gonna say
I
I'm gonna
wouldn't
say
be wrong
modern.
to say I have a lot of love for Soulsborne in general.
Yeah. So exactly. So because of that I'm going to say modern as well. But it's that's tough.
Very
Louis?
interesting. I'm an old school boy, man. Give me some of that Super Nintendo goodness.
Ah.
Mhm.
Interesting. Okay.
The thing about the Soulsborne that I love so much is that they execute perfectly on things of the past. I'm someone who's extremely prone to nostalgia, and I like to indulge in it. So for me, it doesn't come as something like as you call them like rose tinted glasses. For me, it's become more of a filter.
Oh, okay. Just
Where
a
it's
permanent
just-
filter.
Yeah, like I can't not, just because these emotions were so formative in how I view that media, that I can't not see like echoes of it in other things. But I try to use this as a way to create bridges between games that might be a little out of my comfort zone, and to say, yeah, but it's kind of like that old game that you liked, so you might as well give it a try. And I've got into a lot of good games that way. Some of my favorite games, they could be called precursor to the whole Souls genre, and I wouldn't argue. Like one of my favorite NES game, Faxanadu, has a very, not only in its aesthetic, but in its functioning, very reminiscent of Souls games. But yeah, I'd have to say I'm an old school boy. Like real old school. Give me a Game Boy Color and a Super Nintendo and I'm happy boy.
Mhm.
All
Who
right.
didn't we do, Dan?
Dan and me still, but yeah, let's
Yeah.
do Dan.
Gorge. Sure.
So what was your cutoff again? Remind us.
Kind of similar to you, like 360, PS3 era.
Okay.
The dawn of high def, and when graphics became more important.
Yeah. It's basically the era of plugging in an HDMI cable in your console
Exactly.
rather
yeah.
than composite output.
Yeah.
Those 3
Yeah.
colors. Yeah.
Oh man, tricolors. Kids these days, they don't even know.
Where does the
I'm
yellow
speaking
one
of
go?
an era where I was connecting through coaxial, okay?
Oh,
So-
fuck that. Fuck the
Put the
coaxial.
TV on 3 and
Yep.
then boot your game, otherwise you're getting a garbled mess.
Yep. Channel 3, the best
Yeah,
channel. I'm gonna say old school for Dan.
I'm going to say old school too. Comfortable. I'm confident.
I'm actually gonna say new school.
Ooh.
I'm playing the numbers game a little bit, but I like to think
Worked
that
out for me.
he respects the old school, but he looks forward to new school. So I like to say new school.
Does he look forward to new school though? Do you? Dan?
That's a fair assessment, Louis. But unfortunately, you should have gone with your gut. 110% old school.
Cool.
Like
alright.
back
And I
back when
knew
games
it
were
too.
games.
I knew it too.
You know.
You've played too many good SNES games to say that you're not at least a little bit fan of old school.
Yeah, and honestly, I might also just be off a high of having recently finished Final Fantasy Tactics for the PS1, or rather the War of Lions remake for the handheld.
Same difference.
Same. It's the same game exactly, just a fresh coat of paint, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like the focus wasn't, which is kind of ironic because like we all well, not remember, but we know about the Bit Wars, you know, where there was that famous commercial where Genesis was going against, I think it was it the NES or the Super Nintendo at that
Super
point?
Nintendo.
Genesis does was what Nintendo don't, you know.
That was Super
And it was all
Nintendo.
about that was Super Nintendo, right? Yeah, and look at Sega now. But
Yeah,
anyways,
that war was created by the media, though.
of course. Yeah, because I feel like, you know, it wasn't about being better than the other guy. It was about delivering a good experience. They were rivals, not enemies. And I think that's a very important distinction. And I feel like, especially for business, it is important to have a rival to kind of, you know, keep driving you forward, to keep innovation going.
It's also a little bit that back then, like Nintendo had pretty much a monopoly of what was considered like the console to have. So Nintendo had in no way, shape, or form the intention of developing a console that was better than Sega or better than that guy. No, Nintendo did its thing. It set the standard. Others followed and tried to beat it, and they failed.
Mm-hmm.
But that idea of like a bit war, like you're right, they were rivals. I'm sure Nintendo was keeping an eye on what Sega was doing and how popular Sonic was getting. But ultimately, Nintendo stayed true to what it believed, and it just shows because it's still living. But yeah, interesting. All right. So I guess we only have Jacob left.
That's me.
Jacob
There's
is
him.
definitely a modern boy. Definitely. Like Witcher 1, 2, 3.
Yeah, it's
Oblivion. Even I think your cutoff point even would include Morrowind.
No, Morrowind was 2002.
yeah, that was
That's
pre.
old
That was
school
Xbox.
Xbox.
That's right. That was
Yeah.
just Xbox.
Yeah.
But
Dark
yeah, no, I'm
Souls.
saying modern board. Yeah, you're a modern guy.
Well, I'm trying to think of like some. Yeah, Witcher. Okay. Oof. Yeah. Oh fuck. Yeah. I don't know. I think it has to be modern as well. I think there's too many of his favorites
Mm-hmm.
that fall into the category. I'm gonna go for modern. Yeah.
Dan, did you answer? Right.
Yeah.
in
I
agreement?
mean, modern. Yeah.
Well, you're right. Spoiler alert. You're right.
So,
But there's buts. I'm not gonna. Overall, yes, modern. But I will, and I have a bunch of stuff to say on this. Actually, like I kind of spent all last night smoking a joint and thinking about it. But I'm gonna try to space it out a little bit. But I will, say, if we're talking strictly AAA, then old school. But if we're looking at the industry as a whole,
Interesting.
from 2006 to today, compared to everything before that, as a whole, modern, and there's a lot of reasons I'll give for that. But I want to make that distinction.
Interesting. That's an interesting cut.
Because even like you look at The Witcher, okay, Witcher 3, okay, but Witcher did not start like as a big budget AAA thing too, like Witcher 3 is what put the franchise in that stratosphere. So even that, I don't consider the whole franchise a part of AAA.
Yeah, Witcher 1 had a pretty modest budget. All things
Yeah,
considered.
1 and 2 really. Like it was only 3 that really brought the attention to them. So you can even argue that 3 isn't even a AAA game by average AAA
It's a
standards.
quadruple A game.
Yeah, pretty much. It's AAA without the baggage. But yeah, overall modern. But if we're talking strictly AAA, then definitely old school. But yeah, I'll let you guys wonder about my reasonings. But we can move on to the next subject question if we want. I don't know. Or if
Anyone have any
wanted to-
burning questions?
Or if anyone just wanted to dive in and ask me stuff about what I just said. I don't know, whatever. Someone just...
Nah, you're not interesting enough, Jacob.
Oh,
Sorry.
ouch.
It's about time someone told you.
I wasn't gonna say it, but
Let's see.
I mean, yeah, putting a distinction between liking the old school AAAs, but preferring the modern possibilities is an interesting idea, an interesting concept. Because
May I ask a-
I do pretty much exactly the opposite, where I like the old school AAAs and the modern like games that emulate the old school genre.
Can you guys give me some examples of what, like, so old school AAA versus, like, because I'm thinking
Knights
about
of
the new
Old
school
Republic,
AAAs.
Baldur's Gate,
Okay.
Half-Life, Doom, Zelda, Mario,
Okay,
Mega
but
Man,
wait,
Sonic.
Okay, hold on a second. Hold on. Some of
Pump the
those.
brakes on Sonic.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I don't know. He's pretty freaking popular. He's pretty big at the time.
No, I know. Look,
I'm
I
not saying
can't deny
today.
that I played
We're
Sonic
saying back
Adventure 2
then.
Battle on the GameCube like a motherfucker. It was all about that Chow Garden. But Julian, you had a point.
Yeah, I was gonna say you're talking about like old school versus new school, and some of those franchises you mentioned.
Couldn't
I feel
be
like the
more
new
old school.
Well, yeah, no, they are old school AAA. But when I look at the new era, the modern era of those franchises, I think I think the AAA versions of modern era are fine. Like modern Mario doesn't like. I don't
No.
think it like sacrificed all of its
Yeah,
identity.
Mario's
or even
probably one of the
Zelda.
games that held up the
But
best.
Nintendo amongst that is probably the only ones that really, do that well. Whereas Half-Life, I mean, till Alex came out, it didn't exist for 3 generations.
Yeah,
But,
that's not like that's just
and
Valve. Valve
as-
is basically also kind of silent.
and as amazing as the modern Dooms are, they are different from the old school ones. So you can still see the argument. People could still make the argument in favor of them. I think it's more like just the creativity and the willingness to take risks, is what I miss from the old AAA or the old mainstream, because you don't really see that much anymore, if at all, really, in the current mainstream or the current AAA.
So the budgets are so high. It's hard to take
Yeah.
risks without losing too much money. Going
Yeah.
bankrupt.
Freeman, I presume.
I think. Yeah, I see what you mean. I think because there were companies that were able to take more risks without going under. I recently, just for an example, there. We were just briefly touching upon this before that the PS3's store is going to be shutting down soon. So I'm trying to compile a list of things to buy before that's gone forever. And in the process, I was able to look at what kind of PS1 and PS2 games are on there that are worth checking out. And I just looked at like a list of PS2 games, which is for me the cutoff of old era, and the AAA PS2 games that existed. I was like, where? So, some of them I almost felt like were a joke. I'm like, this never existed. I'm like, there's so many with such crazy names, with no franchises to go with them, like completely original IPs by massive companies.
Yeah.
It just exists and nobody knows. Like some of them are called like one was called like oh my god, it was just like a bunch of letters and numbers, and I was just like, this isn't real. But there's just so many weird ideas, like, oh, this is a game where you're a psychic bee, and I'm like, okay, well, that didn't exist. I'm pretty sure I remember that era. There was no game about a psychic bee, but like, there's just a list of games that, yeah, like they were just like, well, what if we tried this? And what if we tried this? Whereas I guess I get your point that nowadays it's like, okay, well, we have Battlefront 3, we have Battlefield 3, Call of Duty 3. Like, it's just like, you gotta keep up with the franchises.
Let me ask a question then, just related to this. What's the last AAA release that you felt like really took a risk, or just made something that on paper wouldn't have looked good in the board meeting?
I don't know if it. Oh yeah, okay.
Last of Us
A
2.
giant fetch quest. I'll tell you that's a risk.
Sorry, what did you say, Dan? I didn't hear.
The Last of Us 2.
Oh, well, there was no. Well, okay. Well, that's actually another interesting layer, because, when I think more creative risks, especially with the old school, it wasn't about narrative, because that's where they took risks and shat the bed. The rest of it as a game, we can have a discussion about, but it's the least risky game out there, because it's practically a movie with light gameplay elements. It has the most mass appeal, as far as visuals are concerned, at least, and ease of play. And the fact that it's super heavy narrative, it's like a TV show at that point. that wasn't creative risk. That was just retardation taking the shape of a video game. But that's another discussion. Sorry, Joey.
Well, it's okay. I hold back any of my arguments just because I feel like that this isn't the place for to start this battle on Last of Us. So I'll hold off on that.
He's coming with me.
But yeah, I would confidently say Death Stranding is the example of like a complete creative risk.
That's definitely a good example. But it says something that you need to be literally a celebrity in the industry with a bunch of good games on your name just to have the opportunity to make that game, you know?
That's true.
Like that doesn't happen at, some other Sony studio or something like that. Like that's because
No,
this
if
guy
anything,
is a god amongst
Kojima
men,
had to leave the studio he was at because they wouldn't let him do
Exactly.
Death Stranding.
Huh. Sorry,
Even,
completely off topic, but I just noticed something interesting. Because Discord tells you what game you're playing. I'm playing Half-Life 2, but Discord says I'm playing Gary's mod.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Can't tell the difference. That's hilarious.
Yeah. But, sorry.
And the idea that it would default to Gary's
Yeah, it's like,
mod
why
more
don't
than
you
Half-Life?
default to Half-Life, which is what the basis of Gary's
the other
mod
way
is,
around.
Like, Gary's mod is literally that mod. But I guess because it's more popular as far as, because it still gets streamed and stuff, so I guess that's why they defaulted to it. Anyways, sorry about that.
It's all good.
So Death Stranding. Anyone else got any?
Man, I think Death Stranding was probably the biggest risk in recent times. I was trying to think of something else, but other than some jokes about putting Bayonetta 2 on the Wii U, I don't know what qualifies as a creative risk anymore because it's been so long since I've seen it.
Yeah.
I feel like a lot of that creative risk was taken by these B studios that were Legion back in the PlayStation 2 days
Yep.
that just disappeared when the indie scene became what it is.
In some cases, yeah, but you could also look at some pretty big AAA. Look at BioWare made the original Baldur's Gate games, and then turned around and made Knights of the Old Republic, which was from a gameplay perspective completely different. And then where it gets really creative risk is after they made that, they then made a bunch of original IPs, their own universes, completely disconnected from nostalgia or hype or anything with
Star
Mass
Wars.
Effect, Jade Empire, and Dragon Age.
Yeah, but is that really a creative risk?
Today? Tell me, when was the last time BioWare had a new IP? Anthem. And there was
Well, they did it.
they did it, but that was the least creative risk. That was still a risk because it was just trying to be Destiny with mech suits. It wasn't actually trying to do anything different, which is probably why it failed because they also just did it poorly. But when was the last time in a single player market, especially, did they make a new IP? Since those franchises started, they've just released Mass Effect 2, 3, Andromeda, Dragon Age 2, Inquisition, and 4's coming. That's it. That's all they've done since they've started these franchises.
I'm willing to say, okay, I'm comfortable saying this, even if this is a double-edged sword. But I think, as a big fan of horror is always a huge creative risk, no matter what budget you are. Which is why we don't even have a whole selection of them. Basically, Resident Evil is that's it. It's just in the AAA market, it's Resident Evil.
Yeah.
Whereas in the PS2 era, there was 100 PS2 horror games.
Yeah.
But
if
now
you
it's
go
like
indie, you get stuff like Amnesia and all that. So
Outlast is technically indie, or it's like double A-ish. But AAA, we have Resident Evil, and Resident Evil, if I look at it, I think 7 kind of was a creative risk by taking a franchise into the horror franchise into first person. There was a lot of risks going on there with a lot of what they did. I don't know if 8 will be as risky, or maybe it'll be a bit safer with some more action. We'll find out soon,
it introduced a 9 feet tall goth vampire. What more do you want?
Yeah.
That definitely brought on more people, actually.
Yeah.
That made it more accessible to people.
Talk about broad appeal. Jeez.
And
The entire internet is simping over that character.
And as much as that's not a franchise I really play, I can definitely appreciate that. I can notice that they're at least trying to right the ship after Resident Evil's 5 and 6.
They're trying to recapture what made it great.
Yeah. And I can appreciate that because that is a risk today, because even though they're inferior games, in most respects, Resident Evil 5 sells a lot easier because here, zombie action co-op versus atmospheric slow haunted house. Like
Yeah.
so.
Mm-hmm.
It's great.
Bring
it's
back
great to,
tank
it's great
control.
to see. Another game I'll put out there as creative, but maybe not the biggest, but at least it was the kind of game that I wish we saw more of for sure. Is Nier Automata.
Yes.
That was
As far as
pretty
AAA games are concerned, that's a crazy creative risk. It has a lot of appeals. Nice combat and sexy android butts, but for its story and some of its mechanics and the fact that it asks you to replay the game a couple times essentially, and how it handles its ending credits and all that, that's the last game that I saw, or the best example I can think of a modern creative risk from AAA publishers and I remember, and yeah, I mean Platinum Games worked on it, so that's definitely a high tier
AAA,
studio
for sure.
um,
Wait, Jacob.
Yes.
Guys, we're missing the most obvious one. The most obvious one. Because we all consider 360 PS3 to be the modern era. I don't know, Demon Souls and Dark Souls are probably pretty huge risk
definitely.
there.
Yeah.
At the
That is
time.
a fair
Especially
point.
from a studio that had nothing to show that it could do a game like this.
Yep.
And,
If you look
here
at
we are.
the previous games that they had made, this wasn't it.
Yeah.
There it is.
No, it's definitely
Yeah,
a good.
no.
A good one as well.
Yeah,
I guess you'd
good-
have to give that
good
title to
movie.
Demon Souls since it started it all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
I'm just staring at my games. I'm like, one of these
Yeah,
did
that's what
something.
I'm trying to do.
Yeah.
Which one of you did something wrong?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, most of the collection that I have ready on hand is a pretty safe expression of the AAA genre. Unfortunately, I'd have to look at my collection of ROMs on the side.
I haven't played it, but Catherine is also kind of innovative. Atlas in general, I find, is pretty
Atlas
good
is
at that.
very, very. I
Good.
don't like
Good
to
is the word.
consider it as taking risk, but apparently in the modern era it is. But yeah, Atlas just does its thing and whatever works. Catherine was a risk in and of itself. I don't know of a lot of puzzle games that actually managed to mesh a story and a puzzle game in a way that made sense and in a way that didn't feel like the story was forced in there or vice versa. I think you're right. That's a good point.
Like Portal, which is also kind of risky, but
Yeah.
also
Yeah.
Portal was the best exploration of 3D space. How can we make that a puzzle? Let's
Yeah.
go.
And the fact that doubled down on the initial concept and made a full-fledged game for it.
Yeah.
It's also the last full-fledged game they made until Alex. So it's a shame because that's the thing. That's what was great about Valve and Half-Life is every one of Valve's games took some sort of risk or pushed the boundaries forward. Both Half-Life 1 and Half-Life 2 were genre, if not industry defining at their release. And while Portal maybe didn't have, can't put quite at that same tier, it's also up there. I mean, and a game like Team Fortress 2, there's nothing really like it, and it's still going strong after 15 years.
Yep.
Yeah.
Even Alex is hugely. It's probably one of the most innovative games on
From what I understand, it pushes VR, the furthest anyone's kind of taken it yet, at least as far as a storytelling and interactive experience like that.
Yeah, y'all are invited over when COVID's done to
Dude,
put on that helmet.
I was thinking about this the other day. Like we were gonna set a day. How long did it take you to beat?
Oh man, it took me 15 hours, I think.
Okay, so I'm gonna rent your room for it. You don't have to be
15
there. It's
hours.
okay. If you have things you want to do, that's fine. Just make sure I have access to food and water, and I will just stay there for 15 hours till I'm done.
I've done it many
As long as
times.
you live stream it, Jacob, that's all I care about.
Yeah, I mean, if your setup can handle it, I'll definitely do it. I don't know how demanding streaming VR is, but I can imagine it's a little hefty. But yeah,
Not
no,
as bad as it used to be because the VR tech got much better.
yeah.
It's demanding on you as a person.
Oh wait,
Because
sorry, this is
VR
my
can be
favorite level.
exhausting to play.
This is my favorite level. One of my favorite levels in all of video games, by the way. Right here.
Root Canal.
Freaking out. It's one of I use this as like a standard for me. It's like one of the most perfect levels I've ever played.
Ow. Ow.
I'm gonna drop a bomb on you guys, I guess. I don't think I've ever played Half-Life to the end.
Leave.
Oh, rude. Rude. I never beat Dark Souls 1.
Also, I hope you weren't attached to Rios because he's dead next session.
Oh, fucking emotional.
Yeah.
Like, you're holding one of my characters hostage there.
Yeah. Well, you just told me you didn't play the greatest game ever to grace mankind, so
Whoa.
I feel like we're even.
Whoa, whoa, whoa there.
Chill. Fucking hit the brakes there, buddy. Come on.
No, I'm not.
It's a good game.
I'm not out
It
of line here.
revolutionized some things. It's not the greatest thing ever made. It is as many people, and I understand that because, like, you know, it certainly broke the boundaries for many things, and it successfully used a silent protagonist. Something I think Fallout 4 could have used a little bit more of. But
Shots
you
fired.
can't talk.
I'm not gonna go back there. You know what happened when I went there. I'm not gonna
no,
go
I know,
back there.
I know.
Even in Fallout 3, you talk. You just can't.
Yeah,
You just can't
that's
hear
true.
it.
Once,
Yeah,
like, you
I
know,
like the words.
obviously that game had its ups and downs, but I will forever stand that because they voiced the protagonist, it kind of screwed the whole writing team because suddenly there were only 4 canned responses that they could choose that all basically went in the same direction. But hey, I think that's more of a problem about modern gaming is that
You
they
know
try to
what,
push
Dan?
stories so
You know,
far
you know
forward.
how I call that? Trying to voice the main character of an open world game? I call that risk taking.
No,
Implementing
yeah,
a settlement
I gotta
system,
disagree.
I call that risk taking.
if you're following a trend, you're not taking a risk.
That wasn't a trend of that kind of game,
It's
though.
a trend of RPGs in general right now.
Mm-hmm.
What name me the most recent RPG, AAA, that had a silent protagonist?
Outer Worlds.
Okay, that's good. Good.
Hey,
What?
nice.
I'm playing that right now. That's why.
Double noise.
But that was hardly, trying to follow trends. I was trying to show Bethesda how it's done again, and they did for
Yeah.
the most part, honestly. But yeah, I mean, beside from that, like they were trying to follow the trends of like the Mass Effects, the same trend that the new Assassin's Creeds have jumped on. Trying to emulate what The Witcher did, and mainly the Mass Effect games. Really, honestly, Mass Effect deserves a lot of credit for making that a mainstream facet of big RPGs. The dialogue wheel and everything, like that was Mass Effect, and you see that everywhere now. So
Witcher.
all I see from that from Bethesda is just trying to appeal to more people because having a voice protagonist is easier to engage with than having to voice it yourself. And it's also an excuse to dumb down the dialogue.
Yeah.
So it's I
Yeah, 'cause if
strongly
suddenly you got to
disagree
pay a
that that's
voice
a risk.
actor for every single line, then
Yeah, you could easily be
it's
like,
a-
well, we can't afford to have like 8 options for every dialogue, so
exactly.
But
I
then again,
refuse
Disco
to engage
Elysium
with
just
that
released a fully
conversation
voiced
because
version.
we know
of
what
it.
happened last time.
Yeah. Anyways, we're getting a little off track, I think.
Yeah.
We were
Okay.
talking-
Okay. So we can all admit that gaming has obviously changed between modern and previous. We'll start with what we've lost, and then we'll end on what we've gained. What do you think that gaming has lost since, the big step towards HD and all that jazz?
Well, that's where I like the cutoff point that I opted for because we've lost nothing, we've only gained.
Yeah. Yeah,
It-
Louis,
what
if you want to
happened-
just, you can always work from your cutoff point just because.
Like what happened, and where I like my cutoff point is that we've lost nothing and only gained. What happened was that as an industry, we've lost something, but as a media, we've only gained since that cutoff point. So the reality is that we haven't really lost anything in gaming. It's the expression of the possibilities that have narrowed. Because
you mean by
because the big studios refuse to take risk, they fall into this very repetitive, very samey kind of increasingly incremental step forward. It's always taking just a sure step in the dark, like teetering inch by inch forward, whereas back in the day, it was like from one release to the next, it was like leaps and bounds into the darkness sometimes. Like they had no idea, and they weren't in any right to expect some of these games to work as well as they did. And I wish I had a good example of a game that we have no right to expect to work and see. I mean, Demon's Souls is one of them, but that's a
Yeah.
modern game, so it doesn't
Yeah.
really apply. But like, take something like Super Mario RPG. Like you're taking a classic platformer with like very little story depth and just trying to write a story about it and then implement RPG mechanics into it, and then you're trying to cram all of these things. And what came out could have been, if it wasn't modern AAA hands, it could have been one hot mess. But it was probably one of the most classic RPGs anyone's ever played by now.
And what a perfect combination of studios, you know,
Oh,
Nintendo
man.
and Square Enix.
Square
like,
and Nintendo, like,
they should have kept working together. I think that the Final Fantasy series would have. I mean, obviously, you know,
Yeah.
I say that, but Final Fantasy VII, Final Fantasy IX.
yeah, but you know what happened, right? You know why that happened, right? That's because Sony went to Square and was like, "I'm gonna pay you big bucks for your games," and Square was like, "Okay."
Yeah, exactly.
Well,
That's
I mean,
all
we
it
still
is.
saw
It's
this
all
with
money.
BioWare and Sega. We got Sonic RPG, which did not quite break the same mold, but you know, they did that. They still did that.
Wait, Sonic RPG?
Yeah,
Yeah,
the
the
first time I
DS.
hear of it.
It's BioWare's Black Sheep. It's Sonic and the Dark Brotherhood. That's a BioWare Sonic RPG.
What?
I'm so happy you guys don't know about that. I feel honored.
What? Hang on, you may have just changed my life here. What is this?
Yeah, that's the thing. Feel free to look at that.
Oh my god! What the flippin' fuck am I looking at?
A BioWare Sega Sonic RPG, I think.
This is my life is different. What the fuck? Okay, hang on. Carry on. I got to do some research.
Go ahead, my friend. Like I have it emulated. It's actually not very easy to come across one of them, but yeah, that was again something kind of weird that happened like on the same vein as Nintendo and Square Enix. Just a weird combo of a non-RPG genre making an RPG with a very big RPG genre with a big franchise. It's just yeah, those are the weird things I kind of miss happening in the industry, like that, like seeing a spin-off of your favorite franchise in a new light is always cool, I think.
Oh man, and they like implement fucking the Mario and Luigi Superstar game fucking mechanics where it's like, oh man, that's like harkening back to Legend of Dragoon. That's crazy. Wow. I might have a new game to play.
It's worth checking out. I mean, if you emulate it, it's free. So
Yeah. Wow.
it's not like you can find it any other way. So it's not like Nintendo's really losing out here.
Yeah. Exactly.
Also, I didn't even think about this. It's Nintendo DS exclusive, so that's like Nintendo hosting a Sega BioWare RPG.
Yeah.
Well, Nintendo bought the right
What
to
the
Sega
hell?
when Sega folded, so
Oh yeah.
Which is also kind of funny when you think about it.
I think it's hilarious. They were competing for so long only to see Nintendo go, "No, you're mine now."
I wonder if I'll ever see that happen again with the three big guys between Nintendo, Sony, and Microsoft.
seriously doubt it.
Yeah, no.
If something like that was to happen, Sony would buy Nintendo because Japan.
That would be insane.
I
More
think
Microsoft,
Xbox would
I'd say.
rather. I think Xbox would rather go under. It would try if it could, but Nintendo won't sell itself to the Americans.
No. Nintendo would rather like see
They
their
took
company
2 atomic
burned to the
bombs before they surrendered us to us the last time, so
ground.
it's
Yeah,
gonna take a lot more than just their company folding for them to give it up.
that's fair.
Jesus. Yeah.
Besides, and the weird thing about Sega that not a lot of people know is that technically it was an American company.
Yeah, service games.
Yeah, it was servicing arcade cabinets, but it was an American company working in Japan. Back when the war and well, in the remnants of after the war, when the U.S. still had a huge grip on a lot of things that happened in Japan.
It was started by a soldier too. Yeah.
Really?
Back then,
I
yeah.
didn't know that.
It's the title Sega Service Games. That's what it's. It's a shortened version of that.
Oh, we lost Dan.
Okay.
I guess
you
I
went off
can't
to
resist
Sonic
starting the
RPG.
Sonic game. Damn it, Julian, you've derailed the podcast.
Hello.
Too good
Welcome
at
back,
that.
Dan.
Sorry.
Well, that was interesting.
Sonic RPG crashing your computer?
Maybe. Just downloaded a virus. See you guys in a
Yeah,
bit.
well, that's what it sounds like at least.
Yeah, sounds like what's going on. All right, so we were talking about what we think we've lost, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I gave the short answer. We've lost nothing, gained everything. It's the studio's fault if we feel like we've lost.
I'm gonna pretty much completely agree with you on that. Because yeah, I was going to say the same thing, that we haven't lost anything. The only thing we could say we've lost is the integrity of the AAA market,
Yeah, pretty much.
which is a notable loss and a fair loss to mourn and argue that hurts the industry, since it is like the main representative of the industry, unfortunately. But this is why, you know, my answer earlier, I distinguished between AAA and the industry as a whole, because the reality is the industry is so much more than just what AAA is, or what mainstream games are. It's because, sorry, I have like three things in my head at once right now. One aspect of that is, you know, if you're arguing, you know, like, oh, I miss playing those old school games. Well, now more than ever, you can play any of those games easily.
Yeah.
And you're not going to convince anyone that you've played every game, every old school game out there, so you can't argue that they just don't exist anymore. Because they're there. And now more than ever, through emulators and just through more openness, like, correct me if I'm wrong, but I could pick up Chrono Trigger on Steam for like a couple of dollars.
$9.
Whereas a few years ago, you had to drop like a paycheck to get that.
I think
yeah,
a cartridge of Chrono Trigger goes on eBay for something like $150.
You know,
Oh yeah, it sucks.
I mean, that's
hate
about what
that.
I paid for it when I went to Blue Nose.
yeah.
Well, if you know where to go and you have your good sources, then
Yeah.
yeah, you can get gems for cheap.
Yeah. But I'd
Like
say, you know,
Village de Valor sometimes will
Yeah.
sell you something that they just clearly don't know what
Yeah.
they have.
I used to
Yeah,
go
that's,
there after work.
Got Silent Hill 1 on PS1 for $2. That's like
Oh.
Yeah,
my
you
God.
won't
CID.
see that on eBay. You won't see that on eBay.
No.
No, everyone knows the value at that point. Facebook Marketplace is a little bit better for that, but yeah, getting old games is like something I've tried to do. I've been in that market for a long time.
Yeah.
yeah.
Buying
And it's, you know, it's
retro.
more lucrative than ever. It's more open than ever. And if you're not a collector and you just want to play the game,
Emulators, yeah.
at
Emulate.
worst, there's emulators. But what I'm arguing is even, you know, more, you know, acceptable means of playing, if you will, that aren't involved downloading, you know, things.
Illegal software.
Like you
Sorry,
still
Nintendo.
like so many, you know, old school, you know, not just like Western RPGs, but JRPGs on Steam. You know, like Final Fantasy VII is on there. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
As well as I don't know if they're all on there, but many of the old Final Fantasies are there.
I know 6, 7, 8, 9 is there. 10, 10, 2 is there.
Really
11
wants
might
to
not
freeze
be
there.
because that's an MMO.
1 to 6 are there as well.
1 to 6 are there, so they're all there.
Yeah, so that's what
Yeah.
I'm saying. So,
And
so
one-
everything.
11 and 14.
Yeah.
One thing I will say though is some of the ones that are there, like some of the older ones, is the remakes of them. But a lot of
Yeah,
those
yeah.
remakes actually improve and fix a lot of things about these games. So I can't really complain. The only complaint I would have is that Final Fantasy XII, the original, should be there because Zodiac Age changed quite a few things that some people disagree with.
Oh, yeah?
But yeah, they changed the license system quite a bit, and
Okay.
Yeah, and it's similar for like the old CRPGs. Like you have the Baldur's Gates enhanced editions, Planescape Torment has an enhanced edition, Icewind Dale, and then
GOG is there
even
too.
yeah, and then even beyond that, and again, you know, looking beyond the scope of AAA, is these games, you know, whether it's classic CRPGs or JRPGs, they still exist, and not just in the sense that the old ones are there; they are still being actively made. You know, especially you know, I know with the CRPG market, you know, with a game like Pathfinder, like, you know, that exists. You know, that came out 2 years ago. That's a game with as much old school sensibilities as you could possibly imagine. It's literally like, I've seen people, and I mostly agree so far. It's the Dark Souls of the modern CRPGs. So just to give you an idea of how intense it is, with a D&D rule set that's, you know, more elaborate than what we play with, and that
More
came
so
out
than
2 years
Pillars?
ago. I'm
More
talking
so
about
than Pillars?
Pathfinder.
Yeah, but is Pillars you think it's more streamlined than Pathfinder?
Yes.
Okay. Just wondering.
Not like a lot. Like, I'm not saying like Pillars is streamlined, but and you know, maybe I'm still like in the honeymoon phase with this Pathfinder rule set, but yeah, no, it's definitely the most intense of the CRPG rule sets that I've dabbled with. And I've played Divinity, I've played Pillars, I played Pathfinder, obviously. and I've dabbled a bit with the older ones, and it's pretty. I mean, it doesn't quite compare to like second edition D&D because that's its own monster, but as far as the modern ones, absolutely. And that's a game that's getting a sequel this year. And a sequel that what little I've looked at is going to do even more with it. And CRPGs aren't the only genre that's had this renaissance of stuff. I mean, you just look at the platformers, things like Cuphead, among others, Metroidvanias, like you have things like Dead Cells, Hades,
Bloodstained.
Bloodstained, Ritual of the Moon, Momodora, Reverie Under the Moonlight. I mean, the options are infinite.
Yeah, like
Shovel Knight.
there are almost more. This may even be the case with CRPGs because its golden days were surprisingly concise. There may be more CRPGs out now than there were back then. And I don't know if I can't say that's the same for platformers and the like, but for CRPGs for sure that is the case. And so, like I said, like what you're saying, Louis, we've gained more, and you can argue, like I said, the only thing we've lost is the integrity of the AAA market. But now more than ever, the indie scenes and a big thing that's I think one of the best parts of the modern era because of how integral it was in the CRPG revival is Kickstarter and similar programs like that. Because that's where Pillars and Pathfinder come from. They were like almost entirely funded through their Kickstarter, and both cases they absolutely obliterated their initial asking price and most, if not all, of their stretch goals, except for maybe the most ambitious.
Same for Bloodstained and Shovel Knight. Like those are like a lot of the revival genres are really popular on Kickstarter because there's a market for it, but the publishers don't trust it. So rather than going to a publisher, they're like, well, the public wants it, so they'll fund it. And lo and behold, every damn time, even for bad games like Mighty Number 9, there's a market for that.
And even games that don't have like big names on it or
shots fired,
even those still get it because there's still that market for it. And I think it's amazing that the industry now exists in a way where we can, influence the creation of those games with these platforms. It's hard to hold influence over the AAA market unless we just stop paying them for anything. But if we can also at the same time put our money towards other things that we want, and it's proven that it works, like we have everything we've had and more.
Yes. It's a great time to be into games.
And what's great about those revivals and those few games that do come out and stick to those old school sensibilities is they're boosted by the main thing we've gained in this modern era, which is the visual experience. Especially games like Divinity Original Sin 2 is a beautiful game that's like pales into comparison to what anything people could have ever imagined Baldur's Gate looking like. Like what Baldur's Gate 3 is going to look like is like mind-blowing to the people who played it back then and to people who saw the genre essentially die out until a few years ago. And you see with any genre you can make that argument that when they do come, whether it's through Kickstarters or indies or the occasional AAA risk taker, they're amazing because they also benefit from all the quality of life improvements and all the visual things we enjoy today. That's why a game like The Witcher 3 is just so ridiculous because it's got everything.
I know you had to plug it. God damn.
Yeah, it's only a matter of time every time.
Insert the mandatory Witcher 3 reference here.
Technically, I already talked about it, but I had to just make a point that, like, this is what I mean,
Yeah, well, that's fair.
And then, especially even in the AAA market, like by and large, it's like, okay, you got Madden 25,000 fucking 301, you got Call of Duty 8 million, but then occasionally you get a fucking gem that comes out that has old school sensibilities and takes advantage of the AAA budget. It's rare, but then you get games like Ghost of Tsushima or Bloodborne that are just undeniably better than anything that could have existed before, because not only does it play like those old great games, it also has all the benefits of looking like a modern game.
I'm not so sure I would equate Ghost of Tsushima for being like more old school. I feel like it plays more like an Assassin's Creed with a little more.
Yeah, maybe not the most hardcore old school, but definitely like, doing its own thing. You know, its combat is, you know, got some layers to it. It's got exploration, and you know, it's not as handholdy as some of those Assassin's Creed games by like with its wind mechanic, like how you track waypoints and stuff. Like
I love
you know,
that. Yeah,
that's one of, you know, yeah, it's not the most deep or hardcore old school style game, but it does some interesting things that you just couldn't do with old school games, while still, like, you know, definitely not nickel and diming you, and definitely not creating a unfinished experience, you know, like,
absolutely not. Yeah. No, Sucker Punch is reliable in that
it's
sense.
the epitome of you know, the best of what the AAA market could be today. You know,
In
short
that
of
sense,
being,
God of War
like-
as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, they don't necessarily compare it with your necessarily personal preferences, but those games, those experiences, because of how visually immersive and enticing they can be, and how cinematic they can be, especially in the case of God of War, and, you know, like Last of Us games, you know, they offer something that, you know, whether it's better or worse than older sensibilities, it's still, you know, very much worthy of being appreciated and talked about in that vein. And then when you combine the two, you get the graphics and all that stuff with a game that's filled with depth. You know, something like, you know, at the time at least, Dragon Age Origins or Witcher 3, or, you know, in the CRPG genre, something like Pathfinder. Like, it's like, wow, this is peak right now, and we couldn't have had this back then just because the technology didn't exist.
Okay, there's something I've been wanting to say about that. Actually, riffing on what you're getting at here,
Yeah.
is I think that a lot of that we're talking about, like what the new school has to offer here, is this. A lot of this has to do with how accessible making games are, and what ends up happening. And this is what I think would be my favorite, aside from the obvious like BioShock, whatever.
Yeah.
The things that the one aspect about modern games that makes this amazing is how accessible it is to make them with small amounts of teams.
Yeah.
With smaller teams, and with pretty impressive outcomes. If you look at like the market, so obviously many more games are being made today than were being made back then. So there's more options available for the players. But
Yep.
what ends up happening because of that, and this is it, is that you get like I feel like it's a disservice to call them clones, but you get like other games that are very similar to other genres of games. Like we were talking about like Metroidvanias and stuff. But the
Soulsborne
dude-
genre.
I'd say
For a modern take, at least.
yeah, but I'd say it's even less so with Soulsborne genres, like Metroidvanias or roguelikes even, or more. Or there's many more of those, and the way that they get to innovate, because there's so many of them coming out, so there's so many new innovations because so many people are working on them, that we can get other possibilities. I just wanted to give you a couple examples of like how that has happened lately. If you look at Pokemon, okay, Pokemon is like a cornered market. It's like, yeah, there's Digimon and a few other games where you do monster hunting, or collecting it. But it's like it's really been Pokemon that has like, it's in charge of that market. And you're like, well, who else is even gonna bother to try and compete with that? But you even get like a game like Temtem, which I haven't played, but like an indie studio basically taking an attack at making a monster collecting game. It's like, it's impressive that now today we have the possibility to have other options, so many other options, and quality options in these genres. I wanted to also mention Shovel Knight in that respect, because Shovel Knight, to many people who play it, might think that Shovel Knight looks kind of like it looks exactly like old games in it. It's like, oh, it's
It's
just
a Mega
like
Man
those old
game.
games.
Shovel Knight's one of my favorite games, so I'm with you on that one.
Exactly, and there's a lot to look at with Shovel Knight, because Shovel Knight, it does something I think that is incredibly unique, and it is exactly the cornerstone to my point, which is it does a lot of old school sensibility things with its mechanics. It presents itself like it would be an old school Mega Man game with maybe some DuckTales combat, and then what it actually is doing that most people are kind of overlooking is it's slightly improving things that you wouldn't really notice that were not possible on older consoles. So adding maybe a slightly higher resolution, or a bigger color palette, or a wider sound range, but still delivering that sort of nostalgic feel, while actually taking advantage of new school technologies to kind of enhance your experience.
I'm honestly not so sure about that one. because I'm not sure. I'd have to read on my notes again about that one. But I think Shovel Knight was designed with the idea in mind that if it was to be done, it could be ported to SNES without any adaptation. But I could be wrong. But I believe it was made with the idea that it was going to be as close to the original thing as it was. What we're seeing is that because of the people that kept that love of the nostalgia alive, we've figured out new ways to deal with things to make things sound rich or look rich without them actually being richer. If you look at Donkey Kong Country, more specifically Donkey Kong Country 2, you read about how the music was made for that game, you would see that at some point, rather than programming it with the old school MIDI tools that they had at the time, to create some of the effects that the author wanted for the music, he had to code it in manually, note by note by note, so that he could achieve some of the effects he was doing. And what we're seeing in Shovel Knight is just a continuation of that kind of messing around. It was made with more modern code, so like the development process might have been easier in that regard. But as for what it is, the game is no better nor worse than it could have been on a Super Nintendo. But I'm not 100% sure on that one.
Well, I think that no matter what way you slice it, like I remember reading an article about this, but I'd have to find it again to back up my point because I don't know where it is. But there are things in Shovel Knight that just can't be done on Super Nintendo. Like I'm talking just like the aspect ratio and the way it fits your screen. If you plug in an NES or Super Nintendo, it won't really doesn't retain its visual integrity as well as Shovel Knight does, because Shovel Knight is obviously made with the intention of running on modern displays. Even that, just that alone, is already like capitalizing on new school technologies, and even the development of it. Forget the improvements it makes. It's just the development is done in a way that, like, not by a studio. That wasn't made by Capcom. That was made by like
that was Yacht Club Games.
Yep, like just a bunch of dudes who were like, we're gonna make a really good.
Interesting thing about Shovel Knight, actually. The original composer for the Mega Man games, Minami Matsume, actually composed 2 songs for the game.
That would explain why the music is good.
Yeah.
That would explain that. Same
I love
Shovel Knight.
the
That's
music,
right. Same with Bloodstained. Bloodstained, I think, had the same. I forget the person's name, but the person you just said. Actually,
I think you're right too. Yeah.
Composed maybe 1 or 2 tracks for it. That's the whole thing.
Yeah, another example of something that modern versions of these games, of certain games, benefit from, like to go back to the CRPGs, is like having a as extensive voice acting as some of them do. Like something like Disco, like Baldur's Gate and those old ones didn't have much, if any, voice acting except for like narrators and like key one-liners that the main character will say or something.
Monsters going when they die.
Whereas now, even the ones with minimal relative voice acting still have at least voice acting over the core story moments, if not everything. Like Pillars and Pathfinder are like this. Although Pillars 2 was fully voiced because they had even more money and they could just do those things, and just some of the mechanics, like how interactive and you can play around with the environments in games like Divinity. And yeah, just the visuals of certain spells and just certain mechanics being able to be better used. There's just a lot of things. These new CRPGs, just like new of any other genre, just have that couldn't be had in the past. And if you still want those old ones for whatever reason, or you feel like there's still something there, I was saying, you still have access to them.
And it's those genres like CRPGs, in my opinion, that maybe like fell off in terms of popularity over the years, but are getting another shot. Even though, and that's despite the fact that people did want them, but publishers are like, no, that's not what people want now. So they created this environment where it was like an open market for new indie developers to take advantage of that opening and start filling it up with new innovations and keep moving forward with a genre that, if it wasn't for them, would be dead.
Yeah.
Same with like Stardew Valley and farming sims. Like Harvest Moon wasn't really doing so hot, and then Stardew Valley's like, well, fuck it. That one guy's like,
I'll show you how it's done.
He's like,
my beer.
I'll do it. I'll do it myself.
Yeah.
It's like, this isn't quite the Harvest Moon I want. I'll just make a
I'll
multi-million
just
dollar
make it.
game.
Yeah.
And I haven't really, looked at them because I don't play as much as I used to. But even like first-person shooters have had a old school revival. Like there are
Like Dusk?
so many old school Doom likes out there. You know.
Give me a good old SOCOM game.
Yeah.
I'd be down for that. Like a real
Only a matter of
tactical
time.
shooter.
Yeah.
Arma?
Oh god.
No, that's
Arma's
another
an
level.
army simulator.
Yeah. That's not a tactical shooter. That's you can't join the army, so come here.
Yeah, that's
Okay, so like
propaganda
Tom
material.
Clancy. Like,
Yeah.
Like Tom Clancy.
But even
classic
more
Tom Clancy.
like, yeah. Tom
SWAT.
Clancy can be very mainstream.
Like not just calling it tactical because you have to take cover, calling it tactical because you have a team of operatives that you have to escort through points and like
Like Ghost
actual
Recon.
strategy. Yeah. My favorite example of this is SOCOM.
Okay. Which is not that franchise is kind of rip.
Yeah, I know, but
But that leaves an opening, like we're saying.
Yeah,
Like that again.
absolutely.
Like someone's gonna take. Like it's only a matter of time. If there's a franchise that was beloved in any respect, even if it was obscure,
it's
It's
only
like-
a question of time.
Yes, there just needs to be an indie developer or even a mainstream developer that needs a break to do a Kickstarter, and you'll have that game again. Because that was the case with Obsidian. Like they had just gone through layoffs. They were about to close because their whatever other game they were planning just didn't work out. And they're like, all right, let's try to kickstart this old school RPG and save our company. And now they have multi-million-dollar deals with Microsoft. So it's,
yeah, this,
Yeah.
A good point.
that's the best part.
Yeah.
I think of modern.
yeah. As long as they
modern,
can
situation.
still have that freedom to do the things they've been doing. Like I'm super excited for what they pull together for Outer Worlds 2. Because Outer Worlds is short and definitely light in certain respects, but what's there is so good that if they just make a more full-fledged version of that, it'll be an RPG of the year without a doubt.
Well, even their latest DLC, which I'm playing now, seems to show signs of innovation. There's things they do a bit differently.
Okay.
That,
Cool. I
like,
haven't played
I can
them
tell.
yet, so I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah,
Played
they
the first
start doing some things a little more. Well, they added, I guess, really modern stuff, as in like there's cinematics, which was different, like
Okay.
high def cinematics, which makes it feel a
Interesting.
little more professional and modern.
Yeah.
Which I mean could go either way for people, but another thing, like you brought up Cuphead before, and that's another thing that like artistic styles that also couldn't have been represented are like
Yeah.
hand drawn games and like really unique visual styles and ways to approach gameplay are being seen all the time because of how accessible it is to develop these games. Like my favorite game of the year so far is Amori, which I recently finished. It's got like a hand drawn aesthetic and it's an Earthbound like, so
Wow.
like that's a genre. That's a genre that was unique to itself too. Like the Earthbound games were popular for their own audience, but then fell off, and that was it. After Mother 3, and then there were a few indie companies that tried to make games in the same vein, and I think Amori, which is a hand drawn style with pixel art, it's like a weird like combo with amazing music, and that's an indie. Like I think it was like 4 or 5 main developers who worked on that, and like they're nailing it. Like it's not super demanding in terms of like making a AAA game, but yeah, this stuff is possible, and you can make like an incredible game if you just have the right talent, rather than just a massive budget or Kickstarter, of course.
Dan, did
A
you
big
answer
healthy
this
Kickstarter is always
question?
nice.
I know you've been quiet for a bit. I don't know. Do you have
No, I'm listening.
'cause I think the question was, did we lose or did we gain? And I think me and Julian and definitely have talked a lot. So
That's
do you
fair.
have anything to say on this subject as an old school advocate?
I feel like, I mean, all of what you guys said is kind of true. In many ways, like now we have more resources than ever, not only to access old games, but also to, like tell those stories that we want to tell through a medium which wasn't possible back in the day. I do feel like to some extent, though, we've lost some character for games. Because you look back at like the older Final Fantasies and like Earthbound, Chrono Trigger, frankly, a lot of Super Nintendo games, a lot of Nintendo games in general. I feel like games weren't just made you know, just to kind of push like a dramatic story forward or whatever. It took like these quirky risks. And like just look no further than the GameCube itself. Like talk about a quirky frickin' console. Like every single game that came out of that was a gem in its own way, and they all had way more character than I feel like a lot of these new AAA games end up having. So character and soul, I feel like we're kind of not lost entirely, but maybe a little bit put on the back burner. And there are obviously games like you're saying, Shovel Knight, even Hollow Knight. You know, like a lot of these nice 2D roguelikes, which harken back to games of old. Which is why I can't say that like we're losing everything, because there are still games that are being made. Pathfinder, right?
Yep.
You know, but I don't know. I feel like, yeah, I kind of have to agree with the fact that, you know, it's more that the AAA market has become this this basically wasteland of creativity. And it's just kind of sad to see that that's the case. But I mean, it is what it is.
You're putting your finger on something interesting here, because a lot of those things that we call creative back then really came from a place of necessity. If you look at a lot of the things that were done, like on more specifically on Nintendo, but it was still very true on Super Nintendo, is that sometimes to achieve something close to what they wanted, because they don't always achieve exactly what they wanted, sometimes to achieve what they were trying to do, they had to be insanely creative in how they went about doing it, just because the technology didn't allow for it.
Yeah.
I feel like with the modern means that we have to generate those games, and I'm using the word generate very liberally here, with the tools that we have, it's like the challenge of finding a creative, insightful way to do things is gone. And it's just more of that, like, the studios are falling for that trap of the, like, well, we have, like, top-notch graphics, like, better than we've ever had before. What do you do with that? Well, the only thing those top-notch graphics seem to be good for is photorealism, so let's go for that. And other than these studios like Atlas Games and others that stick to having this artistic vision for what they're trying to do, I find like a lot of the mainstream has just been looking at how can we make it look more real, without wondering how can we make it actually look interesting. And I think that back then, like, the visual signature of a game or a studio was infinitely more important than it is now. If I show you a lot of shooters nowadays, like, if you don't recognize the scene, you'll have a hard time pinpointing, like, what studio produced it or what game it was from, because you're looking at a gun and a photorealistic environment.
Yeah, that's fair. It just happened to me yesterday with Call of Duty Cold War. I saw a gameplay clip, and I was like, "Is this?" It said actually YouTube's game guesser thing. It said Rainbow Six Siege. I'm like, that's not Siege. What game is this?
Yeah.
Oh, Call of Duty, of course. Yeah, makes
Like,
sense.
if I actually show you a picture of Counter-Strike, the original Counter-Strike, there's no way you're getting that bad. Everybody
Stop
can
showing me
tell
pictures of my
original
childhood, okay?
Counter-Strike.
I can hear and smell pictures of the original Counter-Strike.
Terrorists win.
But yeah,
Like,
no,
it's just some of these games had such, whether it be because it was the best that they could do at the time with the computers that they had in the studios, or whether it's just because that's how good they felt they could make it without starting to lose an audience because their PCs weren't good enough. Like, there was a character to it that's been lost in a sea of just photorealistic shooters and semi-realistic, like, anime-tastic RPGs, or JRPGs rather. Yep. Did that actually mute me? It didn't. All right. Cool.
yeah. Well, that's what you're touching on is a lot of why I draw that line between old and new, at the point where HD came in, because that was the point where you could start to lean on simply graphic fidelity to market and sell your game. Whereas what you're describing is like before you couldn't do that, because at least not easily, because there was no sure you had like, oh, look at the first 3D game, or look how realistic these graphics are, and it's a dude with like 4 pixels to his name, and like you're like, oh, okay. But now it's really like, okay, wow, that looks impressive, and you can sell things based off that, and it's easier to sell things based off that. For whatever reason, it's just the way it is, and that's where I think that's why we've lost the creative freedom because they're like, or the creative risks because they're like, we don't need to take those risks anymore. Back then, the games were dependent on how they differentiated themselves, and you couldn't differentiate yourself by just saying you got the smoothest 4K bro dude shooter experience, you know?
Back in SNES days, having your games be called a clone of something else was basically like killing the game.
Yeah.
It was basically calling your game a failure, because if I could point finger at your game and call it a something else clone, then it was over. Like everybody would just jump on that idea, and it was done. And more often than not, it was true. When a game was being pointed finger at, like saying that, oh, that's just a clone of Dragon Quest or whatever, more often than not, it was true. Very few games managed to break away from that deadly tag that was associated with it. Very few games manage it.
But think about the opposite too, eh? Like you're saying photorealistic graphics, like we're trying to compete, everyone's competing with each other for the best looking graphics. But think about what if you don't have the best graphics and how people capitalize on it. Like this game looks like it's straight out of 2007, and like that, it's like if you don't have it, you're also held to like scrutiny, and it could damage. Even if your game's fantastic, the media and gamers in general could doggy pile on it and like try and mess with your hype.
I mean, it's
I've
part
seen
of
it happen.
why The Witcher 1 probably didn't take off like it possibly could have, because it was bad looking by 2007 standards when it came out. It was using a super modded version of the same engine that ran KOTOR. And then finally, with Witcher 2, it got a bit more attention because The Witcher 2 had a modern, really nice visuals for a 10-year-old game now. And yeah, I think that, and then of course Witcher 3 came out looking like it did, and now here we are, so yeah, it's definitely like if you want it because it's the easiest thing to sell, and you need it because if you don't have it, even if your game is like by all accounts better, people are going to turn towards the one that looks nicer because it's easier to get into.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, just look at what happened with Andromeda. Like that whole quest of like graphic fidelity, if you embark on it, it's a huge risk, because the minute you play the game, if you don't execute to people's standards, then automatically your game comes out like being a failure, because people will just say, well, look at those graphics, they look like 5 years old on a brand new AAA game, like we can't have that. But on the other hand, if you have a studio that wholeheartedly embraces the idea of not seeking fidelity but style, then you have games like Persona 5 that they look more modern than any of the Personas before. But are they modern looking? Not really. They have an interesting signature to them, but they don't fit that modern idea, that modern aesthetic.
Yeah, it's that art
game.
direction
Yep.
with its unique identity. It's stylish, and graphical realism aren't necessarily like the same thing, right? So, but it's honestly, that's hard to pull off. Like what Persona 5 does is incredibly uncommon in terms of having a consistent like thematic, like a visual thematic like that. It's so painfully attractive as a game. Like navigating menus feels amazing. It's just menus. Like you want to be in the pause menu. You're like, oh, it's so nice. You're looking like there's details you won't even notice. It looks like it's made by like Banksy. Everything's just like Banksy design. It's crazy. And I wish more games, would have put attention on everything, because with a lot of graphical realism comes a lot of stylish minimalism, and I feel like it detracts a little from like its unique, its signature that you were talking about that we see a little less of now.
Yeah. And I mean, I mostly agree. I mean, I think there's a time and a place for photorealistic takes, especially ones that push the boundaries, which like Half-Life 2 did at the time. I mean, just looking at this now as I'm playing, I still have trouble wrapping my head around the fact that this game is 17 years old.
Yeah,
nuts.
it certainly aged well.
Like, it
For a
was,
realistic game, that's insane. I don't think any other realism, like any other game that tries to tackle realism, is going to age quite as well. And I don't even know.
I mean, just look
why.
at here two other first-person shooters that came out that year. There was the Doom game, the Doom 3, and the original Far Cry. Like the original Far Cry, not Far Cry 3.
Oh my god.
The original Far Cry. And you could just compare those two games to this one, and you can see like why Half-Life was such a big deal, because occasionally, like, I mean, now it's more saturated, but there was this beautiful moment at that advent of the HD era where like could still be amazed by just how how insane the draw distances are in games and stuff. Like sure, you can still be like, I look at something like Ghost of Tsushima and like I almost want to cry because it's so fucking beautiful. But it doesn't like blow my mind anymore that a game can look like this. It's more like now I have an appreciation for the artistic styling of this game, or in this case more just an appreciation for Japanese architecture and visuals. Fuck, where was I going with this? I was talking about Half-Life.
Yeah, the art style.
Oh yeah, because it used to be that like when you really pushed the envelope, like it meant something. Like there's a reason why when I got a computer in 2007, all I told the guy building it was make it run Crysis. That was a legitimate phenomenon. And I'll argue Crysis is still a great game in of itself. I mean, I loved it, but visually, it's like it still holds up, and it's 14 years old. It still holds up. I'd argue it still looks better in a lot of ways than the other Crysis games that have come out since.
It's like for NASA computers.
Yeah, it was insane. But now that kind of that excitement over that has kind of waned, because now it's expected, and now, if anything, maybe we're on the cusp of like a return towards more artistic vision, because I think short of like a different medium like VR, visual fidelity is I think we're already getting diminishing returns on it, so to speak. Like how much better does Assassin's Creed Valhalla look compared to like The Witcher 3, which came out 5 years sooner? Like in some ways it doesn't even look better, and then so with that it opens up the avenue for more artistic or aesthetics that are appealing, which is why I think Ghost of Tsushima works so well, because you get the obviously much loved Japanese vibe from that. So yeah, if anything, maybe we're heading towards a revival of that. If graphical fidelity does plateau, which I feel like it is.
It is.
Yeah, there's only so much you could do, right? Like the more work you do, the less you're seeing diminishing returns. It's like 100%. Look at the difference between PS1 and PS3, and then PS3 and PS5, and it's like, yeah, there's obviously a huge improvement between 3 and 5, but like it's not like we're going from like a cube to a person's face.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Whereas you look at PS1 to 3, it's like, holy moly, this is what this is possible now. Like,
yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
I hope you're right, though. I mean,
Me too,
I'm skeptical, but
because I mean, I'm not as hard on graphics. I think graphics as a feature of a game, whether you want to focus more on this aesthetic style or just the graphical fidelity, is a worthy, thing to consider when judging a game. It doesn't make the game, Order 1886, is still just nothing.
I just played that.
Yeah, and for like 2 hours and you were done.
Oh man, not much. Yeah, like 6 hours, I'd say.
Yeah,
That's still not much.
no, but with a game, that doesn't obviously sacrifice aspects of it for the visuals, then I think it does become a worthy thing to rate games on and a worthy thing to judge games on. But I don't think necessarily a game should be diminished just because it doesn't have the strongest graphics, especially if it's coming from a not big budget studio or like an up and comer. But I also think it is important because visuals and graphical fidelity or artistic style, play, for me at least, an absolutely massive role in immersing yourself in a game. Especially if you want to talk about like open world RPGs, like it's almost a must. You either hit that just looks awesome like Witcher 3 Ghost of Tsushima, or you better nail the style like Breath of the Wild.
Yeah.
But I think it's incredibly important, and I think it's a worthy thing to go after as well, because if you take like just a game that is just amazing in of itself, like The Witcher 3, or like an older school game, let's say like KOTOR, and give it the modern treatment, like this is why there's such a market for that, for remasters and remakes like Final Fantasy VII and such, because Because yeah, if you're telling me I can play the same game, I know Final Fantasy VII is not the same game, but the point stands. If you can play the same game, but with all the bells and whistles of modernity, without giving anything up, then there's literally no one who's not going to do that. You know, they may go back because the nostalgia or just like alike for the old school stuff, but by and large, everybody's going to make that jump. If KOTOR 2 or if KOTOR had a remaster that looked like The Witcher 3 and didn't sacrifice anything with it to get there, I would never touch the original again.
Yeah, that's a fair point. Like because I have Fable: The Lost Chapters and Fable: The Lost Chapters remastered, and like, don't get me wrong, it's the exact same game, but it just feels easier looking at the nice graphics.
Yeah, and then usually the gameplay is, you know, easier to handle, especially with old school RPGs and shooters, which were very had different control schemes back in the 90s.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's why it's so exciting when you see these old school sensibilities in games get that modern treatment. That's why games like Divinity Original Sin and Baldur's Gate 3 and even Pathfinder and Pillars, at least compared to their inspirations, are so like amazing to people who like that genre, because it's like it was always like, if we want to still play these games, we had to, you know, go play basically read a book. The visuals were nice and cozy, but they were nothing to write home about. But now they are. Even the ones that are, you know, still stay forced in the, you know, isometric perspective. I mean, no one can tell me that Divinity Original Sin 2 isn't an absolutely beautiful game.
Yeah.
And I'm sure Baldur's Gate 3 will be the same as well, and already is.
Oh yeah, Baldur's Gate 3 is gorgeous.
Yeah. And then even ones that aren't as well funded as Larian, like the second Pillars of Eternity, even just the jumps it made from the first Pillars is amazing. And you know, yeah, I love seeing these old school games get these modern revivals, because you can combine the best of both worlds. And ultimately, that's why, or one of the main reasons why the modern era just wins out, because you can, yeah, okay, there's a lot of sacrifices in certain aspects of the industry, but you still have everything there that you had before, and now you can just make it better. It's just a matter of the right developer, the right crowdfunding, or just the right, you know, desires to make it happen.
And Disco Elysium too, eh?
Yeah.
For an isometric game, just being incredibly
It's like
stylish.
the best RPG
Incredibly, like,
you can play to this day.
Yeah, and that's, you know, incredibly stylistic. Also now fully voiced, which is mind-blowing to me, just from the little I've played of it. Just the fact that all your fucking emotions talk to you, and now they're all fully voiced, like...
I
come
can't
on.
even imagine. I heard, like, I read so much in that game, and now I'm like, oh my god, I could play the
Yeah.
whole thing again with like
Yeah.
so
I'm gonna
much
get to it
voiceover.
eventually, but all about Pathfinder now, but Disco's on the list. And even things
Yeah,
like,
it's worth a play eventually.
yeah, and even things like Pathfinder, it's actually like, you don't notice it so much if you just look at screenshots, but it's actually more stylized and a more realistic look, like what Pillars goes for, and it's actually kind of got a bit of charm to it as well. But also just to see a game with modern, like, quality of life stuff, but just with this insane amount of depth to its RPG mechanics, you know, like, objectively speaking, and I can't say for sure because I didn't play Baldur's Gate 2 and all that, but objectively, and, you know, just certainly, you know, just looking at what's on offer, like, it's better in every way than what Baldur's Gate 2, you know, could have ever hoped to have been at the time. You know, just like if, you know, BioWare made a real BioWare game again with, you know, with all the modern technologies it has, with the, you know, the graphical impressiveness of like Anthem, it would absolutely demolish their old school games as far as like what's a better game, if it holds true to, you know, those old sensibilities. And there's always nostalgia and preference, obviously, but if there was a modern day true BioWare RPG made by BioWare, it would undoubtedly be better than anything they've made, simply because of what's available now. The problem is people don't commit to making games like that anymore, certainly in the AAA market.
It's almost like the AAA market got lazy of reviving those games because the indie and the crowd-funded games just they have their thing now. They can do it.
Yeah, I mean, now they're never gonna do it. But you know, they was still ball was still in their court for a while. Like CRPGs, for example, really started to fizzle out in 2001, 2002. When Morrowind came out, that was a real like game changer for the RPG scene. And then CRPGs didn't really revive until literally like 13, 14 years later. Like Pillars of Eternity was the first real Baldur's Gate spiritual successor attempt, and that was in 2015 that came out. So there was a long time where the mainstream industry could have still made it happen, but chose not to. And that's what gave birth to what we have now. It could have been different, but I think it's a testament to the modern technologies we have that the horribleness of AAA can still at least coexist with all this other stuff.
Yeah, because that other stuff ain't going anywhere.
Yeah, like if we didn't develop the right way, didn't have the technology to do these things, and we were stuck with AAA or nothing, then yeah, I think we would all just be like, well, obviously gaming sucks now. But that's not the case.
There'd be like no games. There'd be like no. If it was just AAA, there wouldn't be anything.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'd be getting 5 or 6 releases a year, and
Yeah.
we'd call it a day.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I need some water in my mouth, so someone wants to talk. Go ahead.
I don't know, I feel like I've voiced a lot of my opinion
there's
on,
any,
on
like-
the current state.
Other questions or anything that anyone said you want to circle back to or just anything, But yeah. See what you guys anyone have anything?
I don't know. To be honest, it sounds pretty. I think we're kind of conclusive on it. Like we are certainly a little early when it comes to it. It's only 4 o'clock. But I mean, unless anyone's got any burning questions, I don't think there's any reason we can't have a 2-hour podcast instead of a 3-hour.
We did kind of the process of, how can I say this? We've done the process of analyzing the shortcomings of the AAA industry in regards to handling, I guess, old school sensibilities. But how do you think the AAA could tackle something like restoring these older sensibilities without necessarily alienating that part of the fan base that's always wanting the next gen graphics with the next gen gameplay kind of thing?
I have a good answer for that actually. I think it's a lot simpler than we might imagine, because yes, there's a big risk in spending a huge budget, but I don't think you have to. If you look at and I know this is gonna sound weird, but bear with me. If you look at Ubisoft and EA, they had, Ubisoft stopped, but they used to have kind of a smaller budget side studios that made games like Valiant Hearts and Child of Light, Grow Home, Grow Up, like those kinds of smaller games. And EA, with Hazel Light making A Way Out and It Takes Two, those are the kinds of things we need. We need a big publisher to fund smaller, more innovative things, which aren't always going to do well. But that's how you're going to, eventually strike gold and say, okay, now we're going to fund the sequel to that even more. You need a big guy to kind of to nourish, to fertilize the earth, if you will, and give us. Yeah, well, they need to give us. Funding for smaller studios that they can also direct a little bit and manage, and I think that if they do that, if they produce and publish smaller games, they could encourage more innovation that way.
I agree.
Yeah, I don't even think they need to look at the smaller studios. I think it's literally just a matter of the ones who hold the power of decision making at EA. It's just a matter of them saying we want to do it, and they can do it. The resources are not an issue for these big publishers. It's more that they're more interested in making a successful game as opposed to a good game.
Yes, but the EA still does this, right? Like it's not their major studios who are responsible for making the smaller games, right? Like they have EA is like a big.
It's a conglomerate. It's got a
big
huge...
conglomerate.
Yeah.
They have their BioWare. They used to have Visceral, but they had all these studios who make the big AAA, big budget games, and then they also have like these smaller guys who do the like Hazelight, which is now getting a little bigger, who are making games like Brothers: A Tale of Two Sons and what have you, smaller EA games. Like that's the kind of stuff we need to. Even games that like flop, like Mirror's Edge is a pretty big game, so it's hard to use that as an example. But Catalyst didn't do so well. But you know what? It was something a little different, and it was different enough that we needed stuff like that. And EA actually, despite all the garbage you can throw at them, they do have that. They do have those like EA original mini games that they do, and I think that if more companies did that, you probably have more innovation in the industry.
Yeah, but again, I think there's plenty of room for innovation from the main developers if they're given the permission to do so. Like, I think at this point it's too late because what BioWare was just doesn't exist anymore. But EA could have made the choice after Mass Effect 3 to either say, oh, let's keep doing what we're doing, which is unfortunately what they did, or hey, let's take a back step and realize that maybe this isn't what we want to do anymore. But they chose the unfortunate route, and now here we are. I think it's really just a matter of convincing the publishers to do it, because the resources are there, and I think there's a few ways. I mean, one, a lot of it's actually on us, because a lot of it comes down to pre-ordering and how easy it is for them to make their money on unproven products. And as such, instead of putting all their resources into making the game as good as possible, they spend almost sometimes even more resources simply advertising the game. Looking at you, Cyberpunk.
Destiny 1 is another huge example.
Yeah, Destiny or Fallout, or you just look at the budgets of these games, and you look at the market, how much of that is marketing. Because like the money's there, they're putting it into marketing. Fuck, I keep dying here. I don't think I have enough health to get through here. But yeah, they put all it into that when they could easily put it, into something else. I know with some games you hear about their budgets and you're like, holy crap, that was so much money. But you don't really need to break the bank like that to make the games, because then you go look at The Witcher 3's budget. It's compared to the similar games of its ilk, compared to like Red Dead Redemption, its budget is way smaller. Way smaller than Cyberpunk's even, and Cyberpunk was a shell of a game in comparison, because so much of Cyberpunk's budget went into marketing, because they want to bank those pre-orders.
This is business, right? Like, they do need to make tons of money after all, right? Like, they're in it to make huge amounts of money, and you can't do that without marketing, or it's much riskier without strong marketing.
Yeah, and I'm not saying no marketing at all, just tone it down a little bit. I don't need to see Keanu Reeves 8,000 times while I'm watching a Packer game in December, like, as much as I love him, I don't need to see that commercial every time. But yeah, like, you just need to do it, tone it down a bit, but they're not going to unless we prove to them that it's not worth it anymore by not pre-ordering these games, because they're like, we don't care if the game's bad. We don't care that Cyberpunk was bad. We made like fucking $1 billion on it in one day. They don't give a shit anymore.
You can even push that strategy. You can even push that strategy further by refusing to buy games. I mean, you can't really buy games used anymore because of the huge preponderance of digital media. But like, even just refusing to buy games at launch, just waiting for the price to go down or for sales to happen, is another good way of saying, I'm interested in your games. I'm just not interested in paying $80 for a game that could have been $50. Had you not spent $600 million marketing a game that was already sold.
Yeah.
Like, again, with Cyberpunk, like, they were plastering commercials just about everywhere you can see it. But at this point, I don't think anybody, like, everybody and your grandma knew what Cyberpunk was going to be. Because it shook the internet. That "you're breathtaking" meme, it's just, it's free it's free publicity. Like, they had to put the money to get Keanu Reeves on stage, sure.
Yeah,
but
he paid
didn't
for
have
himself
to
and
go
then
so
some,
hard either.
Yeah.
I think if the AAA wants to fix what's happening right now in its industry, it needs to first get rid of a few preconceived ideas. One of which being that, like, high fidelity or like photorealism means better graphics. it has to break this idea that gamers will only dish so much money in a year for games and start approaching it more with the idea of how can I make this game something that people will want to pay for, and how much are people going to be willing to pay for what I'm producing? Because if you're telling me that a big studio like EA came up with this like old schoolish game that's like AAA studio capable, in the sense that like it's coming from the hands of very qualified people that know very well how to handle the engines they're making and whatever, but at a price point that's just like $50 instead of $80, then you might find that a lot more people are going to be willing to put down the money to buy your game, not on the wicked notion that it's the next best gen graphics with the kick-ass gameplay, but just on behalf of the fact that it's a good game. What you're having in your hands is an experience that's gonna have you go, wow, that was fun, or wow, that was moving, without it having pumped like hundreds of thousands of dollars into just making every strand of hair look as photorealistic as possible. And I'm thinking a lot of what's the name? Oh, sorry, I'm drawing a huge blank on that one. What's Kojima's last thing? The DS
Death Stranding?
Yes. Like, they put so much effort into making it look so photorealistic, but the game behind it, like, I haven't played, so I can't really comment, but the bulk of what I'm reading about it is that the gameplay itself is kind of eh.
I don't
a lot
know
of
if that
walking.
would have been helped with more budget though. I think that's kind of what they.
Yeah, I
Like,
think that was a
that was a
conscious decision on his part.
problem. That was a conceptual problem on that game. It's
Yeah.
just more of an argument to say that the photorealism of those graphics didn't help it in any way, shape, or form. Because
No, but-
ultimately, like, the driving force of that experience was broken.
Yes, but at the same time, I think that if the game looked less realistic, then I think there would have been a much
Yeah.
bigger issue.
Because you'd be taking away the only thing the game
Yeah.
had going for
The
it.
graphics are a nice blanket to help mitigate the risk of what was obviously an interesting design choice.
Kind of like to write off from what Dan was saying about Fable The Lost Chapters, like, it's easier to look at, but it doesn't make the game better.
No.
But that's also, think about the newcomers, right? Like, people who don't know a whole lot about games are going to be more attracted to games that look real, and
Yeah.
that's the kind of market they're capitalizing on.
Are
do
they?
that.
But are
I'm
they?
sure.
Yeah.
I'm sure when people see like fancier looking games, they're like, "Oh, it looks beautiful." Like I know like my parents or when people who don't play games see me playing something, they're like, "Wow, it looks so real." Like they're more wowed by that, and
Yeah.
then they remember that. They're like, "Oh, show me that game that with the." Like when I used to play Assassin's Creed 2, like my entire family would be like, "Oh, play the game where you're the guy in Italy." Like, wow, it's so
Yeah, right.
beautiful. They did such a good job. It looks just like Italy. Go to
Yeah,
Florence.
even
I'm like, okay.
even something as simple as a sports game. I was playing NHL once years ago, and my mom came by and she asked me, "Was like, is this a game or is this real?" And I was like,
Oh yeah, I've made that mistake myself before actually. Where I see like a trailer, I'm like, oh, is this? Me and my brother when the Super Bowl. This is really embarrassing. When the Super Bowl was happening this year, me and my brother were like gonna watch. We don't even care about football, but we were like, okay, we'll watch the Super Bowl. And we were looking for like a live stream or something, and we went to YouTube, and we're like, oh, here it is. And we sat down. I'm like, wait, something's weird. We sat down for a bit, and we're like,
Realize you were watching someone playing a game.
this is
Yep.
the game. This is
Yep.
just someone playing the teams in Madden.
Yeah.
And I was like, holy shit, man. I was completely convinced. So, like, sports games for sure, like, that's pretty much, like, it's the same formula, right? Like, the game's the game.
Well, yeah,
Or
the football,
graphics.
football, right?
Yeah, which is so weird because they don't really push the graphics of those games anymore. They've become so lazy
exactly.
with them.
I feel like they
Because they
don't
have a
do
monopoly.
anything with sports game anymore. They just
No.
re-release with modern rosters, and
Yeah.
that's about it.
Very incremental changes. You know, if you jumped 5 years, like you took 2015's Madden and then 2020's, you'd be like, okay, I can see the differences. But you take 19 and 20, you're like, what? You take 14 and 15,
But even
like, what?
even if you just take those, like, between 15 and 20, does it really feel like 5 years of difference, or does it feel
no,
like maybe
no,
3
but
years of
it's
difference?
it's more just like, okay, I can tell that there's a difference between these ones. Not necessarily 5 years worth for a game that releases every year, you know.
They're doing it because they can. That's, like, free money.
Yeah, well, that's kind of what I'm getting at. You know, like they're gonna keep doing that until people stop buying Madden. But there's no reason for people to stop buying Madden because their options are literally Madden or nothing. So sports in
Well,
particular is
yeah,
in a dire
and
spot in that
even-
regard. But the rest
Even
of
in the
industry
approach
too.
of like these sports game, like just because you didn't buy like NHL 2020 doesn't mean you're not going to be looking at NHL 2021. Like they can perfectly assume that the people who buy the latest iteration might have had a prior iteration that was easily 4 or 5 years old, so they can
Yeah.
kind of get away.
Well, that's how I did it. I think only once in my life I bought Madden games in consecutive years. But you look at my roster, I have like, okay, 06, 09, 12, 13, and then like 17 and 20.
Someone's saying we're really loud, or one of us is really loud. I don't know.
I think it might be my mic.
Huh. Yeah, maybe.
I mean,
I
I
don't
can put down my microphone if it's coming off too loud.
Maybe, yeah. So the levels on my mic, at least on the Twitch thing, seem to be saying I'm okay.
Oh, better. Okay, so
Okay.
someone fixed it.
Someone was just
I think it was my mic just like deciding it doesn't like anything or anyone. So all is well.
Okay, cool. So you can keep going, Jacob. Talk about we're on Madden now. We're talking about Madden.
well, just in
Or
sports in
games?
general. It really epitomizes the problems and like how bad it could be when there's no alternatives. So we just gotta make sure the rest of the industry doesn't get there, and if anything, we pull that even that out of that trap it's in. But that's more down to just EA having a monopoly on
On sports
pretty
games.
much every sports franchise.
You can't skip a year of NHL, or you're not going to get the story for the sequel, though. So
Well, now,
Yeah,
yeah,
like,
actually, with their
definitely.
they do have like, I know Madden does too. You have a story mode now, where you play a guy like in college and get drafted and stuff.
yeah, it's true. I
I
did
know
hear like
the
even
NBA has
FIFA.
one, and that one I think actually is like a direct sequel between the two.
Oh my god. Okay.
Or the FIFA one of the two.
FIFA definitely does.
I know NHL did for a long time. I don't know that they're sequels because it's just seasons, but
Yeah, with these cases, like it's actually like fully voiced, acted like
oh
stories.
damn, okay, wow.
Yeah.
the guy, he made a bullet time script for Half-Life 2.
I mean, Half-Life 2
Oh,
is an
pretty cool
awesome
clip.
game to start messing around with if you're learning how to code for a game.
Modding.
Oh yeah. So anything source related, source engine is just. It's like, oh
Yeah.
my god.
Source and Unreal Engine are two amazing engines
Maybe
to work
putting
with
it on
if you're
hard after
learning.
not playing for a few years was a mistake.
Yeah, it looks like you're getting pummeled there.
Yeah. Yeah, it's been like.
Bullet time would be a nice addition to
Yeah.
this game.
Okay. Fuck these fucking madhouse. So yeah, I don't know that I had anything else to say on the sports stuff. I'm dead again.
Well, the thing about the sports game, and I think that will be pretty much my closing statement on the graphic thing, is that the only thing it has for itself going in forward in means of upgrading the gameplay is making it feel more like the television experience. So for that style of game, it's very reasonable and very expected to think that the next iteration is gonna try to advertise its graphics because it's pretty much the only improvement it can really make. Like, sure, it can lengthen the playbook and all of that, but ultimately, like, the only real tangible improvement they can make is for something like graphics. And to a great extent, same can be said about shooters. Like, yeah, sure, you can write a better story for a better shooter, but if you don't make it look better, then you might as well just be modding Half-Life.
Yeah.
So there definitely are genres of games, racing simulators or simulators in general, like that benefit from the whole idea of pushing forward graphics above all of the other improvements that could be made. But there's so many other styles of game where graphics is just another one of the boxes that the developers should tick. It's more often the biggest box that they choose to tick,
Yeah.
and not always to great effect or not always to the game's improvement. I'm thinking RPGs. RPGs have no need for high fidelity graphics because what's a high, like, what's a real fireball looking like? I don't think any of us have seen it because magic doesn't exist. So like, who am I to say that your
That's what you
magic
think.
looks more right? So who am I to say that like your magic looks more photorealistic than that guy's, other than maybe like, oh, I can see the pixels in the summoning circle on the floor kind of thing.
Jacob, the guy's
Oh, yeah.
asking
Um,
if you wanna try your Is script?
Yeah, not now. I think we're wrapping up soon, so I'm not gonna. Usually we stream from 2 to 5 on Mondays, so maybe next time if you catch us early, I can, turn my Half-Life game to whatever you want.
Oh yeah, and
But
just
I'm not
have to
gonna
look at
jump
the
into it
Mass
now.
Effect podcast to see that we're willing to push.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Oh,
It's
the last mod.
fucking nightmare.
Oh my god. I still have dreams about it. Like I wake up giggling to myself, like what the fuck.
Oh yeah, the nonsense that
But
we saw.
oh man, to this day I still feel like that was a fever dream. Like
Yeah.
damn. But yeah. So did we lose things in the modern era? Culturally speaking, maybe. Actually speaking, not at all.
Not so much, yeah.
Yeah. Everything's still there. Everything can still be played with very few exceptions. And especially if you look
There's more
beyond the
possibility.
AAA, there's so much possibilities both for improvements over old industry favorites and for, new stuff. Things like Nier and other weird stuff. So yeah, as much as, the corporate side of the industry and all that is upsetting, I still think there's a lot of good going on in the industry and a very bright future for the industry, with or without the AAA market.
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree completely. But like, we were on the same side to begin with on this.
Yeah, they were. All right. Does anyone else have any closing remarks or any last questions, topics to bring up? Closing arguments, so to speak, for your stance or.
Yeah, I'll say one quick thing about the state of the industry. It's like if we ignore PC altogether, we're left with what, like Switch, Xbox Series X, PlayStation 5.
If
And,
you can get
what-
your hands on one, yeah.
Yeah, it takes a bit of black magic and a few sacrifices, but it's possible. So the way I see it is that these consoles, they're basically they're there to host the main attraction of AAA games and often first party titles as well. There is an indie market on them, but they're more of it's still more of a backseat for the like games like God of War, Spider-Man.
Yeah, consoles are AAA
Halo.
machines for the most part.
Yeah, because most of the time indies are also available on PC. If you want them portably, the Switch offers that. But at the end of the day, it is like AAA is what dominates the market, and it makes sense because they're the ones with the bigger budgets. They're the ones that
It's got the
use the
massive
most
appeal.
money, they
The
make the most
marketing
money.
muscle.
Yeah, so they're like the kings, and like the people tinkering and innovating are more often than not going to be the indies. And I think that we've seen since the beginning of indie in the 7th gen, well, PS3 360 era, we've seen like a huge explosion in indie to the point where it's
Yeah.
like indie's almost turning into AA again. Like they're almost back to that.
I hope it does, because they there's a need for it, right? It's filling
Exactly.
the void, and I think it's great, especially the more and more, what I hope to see is these indie developers, as they hit these higher levels of fame and stuff, that they don't lose what got them there. That's the real test for me. But if they can pull that off, then the future is bright.
There you go.
Yeah. Sorry.
Where'd you go?
I went to close my
Died
door.
for a second.
Okay.
No, I can play.
That was just his drop the mic equivalent. You walk
Okay.
away.
Yeah.
You drop an
No, I'm
argument,
done.
then you just walk away from the stream.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean the future is in the hands of the indie games, because the AAA caters to its own needs in many ways, where it drives itself forward in very predictable patterns, and a lot of the innovation that we've seen in a lot of AAA games were pioneered in indie games that didn't always succeed very well, but at least the idea was worked in some fashion. It was pre-chewed for them. So I think the future is bright, and the future is in the hands of the indie developers. Be bold, be risky, try stuff.
Some Nintendo as well, like Breath of the Wild brought in some
Hopefully-
innovation.
Yeah.
And hopefully some of the AAAs will take note and follow suit.
One could only hope, right?
Or they'll hear the podcast and they'll say, you know what?
Fuck these guys.
These guys were right.
You know, this guy with 2 views on average on his stream, let's listen to him.
Right?
He's got a point.
I think he knows what he's talking about, man.
I mean, 26 years of game experience, not nothing.
Yeah,
We
exactly.
have a combined 100 years of gaming, like, in this podcast. Like, it's not nothing.
Jeez, don't
More or
say
less,
such
yeah.
a thing.
fuck it. Yeah.
Like, I don't know for you guys, but, like, I was 4 the first time I held a controller.
I mean, I was probably around the same age when I laid my hands on my first mouse and keyboard.
I was
Ready
3.
for the
Suck a
win.
dick.
Well, my
I
first
was
big
1.
contact with gaming was at 3.
No.
Like, on PC. Like, my first contact with gaming was on PC. It was Tetris. On good old PC. But I was 3, and playing Tetris when you're 3 is like you're building a tower and then you're dead.
Yeah, you're like, oh, I want to build it as high as I can.
Yeah.
Oh,
My,
wait.
my mother liked to describe that day as my being mesmerized for the first time, because I was just sitting down on a family friend's, like, on his lap, just watching him play, like, completely hypnotized by the falling blocks.
Mm.
But yeah, I mean, gaming's come a long way in the few years that it's been a thing. And I say
Yeah.
few years, like
few
40 years is
decades.
nothing, but like music's been a
decades.
thing since before recorded history, so I feel like it's pretty
Yeah.
quick to call 50 years short history. But
Oh, yeah,
For
definitely.
sure, yeah.
And even, acting, the basis of movies has also been there since
Yeah.
before recorded history.
yeah, theater in general, like the ancient Greeks were doing it for a long time, and they weren't doing it because they invented it, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, yay to video games. Yay
Yeah,
to
man.
the future.
The rate
Yeah,
of progress,
I-
whatever that means.
Once again, like I'd like for the negative things we talked about to disappear and the like, but ultimately it's going to come down to I hope that developers will have the freedom to do what they want and not be kind of shoehorned into doing what the producers want, the people who just don't care so much, I'd like to see games given enough time to be what they always were meant to be.
Yeah. Well, the best way to deal with the state of that now is just more or less ignore AAA. You're not going to find it there, with a few exceptions, obviously. But everything you want and more exists. You just gotta find it.
I feel like our cynicism regarding the AAA industry is symptomatic of the talk around video games having become a little unhealthy. And I hope that in the future we can have both better AAA games to talk about, but also talk about them in a healthier, maybe more savvy way. I feel like maybe there are some people that are voicing their opinions really loudly that shouldn't be given as big a tribune, just on behalf of the fact that the way, not even the opinion itself, but the way it's formulated might be a little, I don't remember what the word is in English for the word I'm seeking to use, but it's voiced in a way that's meant to create discord, like not discourse, but discord.
Yeah. So toxic, I think, is a good way to describe.
Yeah.
What you're saying.
Yeah, I get that.
Demagogical. There you go.
Yeah. That's a word.
Yes, it is. I like to think it is.
I don't think I've heard it before.
Yeah, it's phrasing an argument in a fashion that paints a bad light about it, even though your argument in itself could be formulated in a way that sounds more neutral. Making
Okay,
a
so
big
it's
deal out of not
inflammatory.
much. Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah. It's any big budget, huge following. Also, the gaming community in general is it could like they're a fickle bunch. I guess
Aren't
we
we
are
all?
because we're included. So we were fickle and like oftentimes hyper aggressive and toxic. So I think that it's like a mob. There's
Yeah.
mob mentalities.
And I think
guess-
that says a lot about how video games reach us as people, to be able to stir our passions as hard
Yeah.
as they do over the internet.
We especially those in our age group, we more or less grew up some way or another attached to the quote unquote golden age
Mhm.
of video games, and as such, oh boy, we've come to expect a lot, and I wouldn't even say unfairly. And the reason why we've become this way, I think, is especially at least in regards to the AAA market, the industry has not lived up to the expectations it basically set for itself in our childhood.
Mhm.
It's
You know,
resting on
we're
its
having to
laurels a
move
little bit,
to
maybe.
indie and other stuff to get it, but I think that's why we get so worked up when a game like Fallout 4 comes out and it's a shell of the game we were promised this was going to be. You know, back when you were a kid playing the first Fallout, you know, for you, but
Oh
you know,
god, yeah.
whatever your example of that is, you know, and you're thinking, wow, in the future it's going to be 3D and look at all these graphics, and then you get to that future and you're given those games from a visual perspective, but then you're like, but this isn't the same game anymore. It's lost too much, and that's why we've become very, you know, to use lack of a better word, toxic about new releases, especially ones in well-established franchises. That's why there's such an uproar over doing things so drastically different in an established franchise. And, you know, it's not completely exclusive to games. You know, we see this with Star Wars, obviously.
Fandoms.
The fandoms in general, yeah.
Yeah. But at least in the regards to games, you know, we at least have the argument that we definitely lost something along the way in the AAA market, and that's where a lot of the angst comes from.
I still think that it's maybe a little harsh to call, like us in particular. I think that like the toxicity I was even talking about was more like people trying to dox devs and like threaten
Yeah.
them. I feel like
That's despicable.
like life threatening
so
their lives, rape
counterproductive.
threats. It's just like holy shit,
Yeah.
guys! Like
No, it's ridiculous.
it's still like,
Like, it's a
I love
game.
it.
At the end of the day, you know?
Yeah,
You want to be upset
Like-
about Cyberpunk, that's one thing, but going as far as to hack the studio to sell its data, like,
Yeah, like,
you're
come
pushing
on,
it there.
grow
You're
up.
pushing it there.
there's a bit of irony in that. Like that happened with Watch Dogs and Cyberpunk. I'm like, okay, someone
Yeah,
they
the
got hacked. I'm
hacker-based
like,
games.
really? Of all game studios that get hacked, it's the two sci-fi hacking ones that get hacked. I'm not saying that's. I don't think that's the right way to approach any of this. Threatening people and getting the, like messing with them. It's just like you said. It's just a game. Like I love it, and it's still one of my. It's something I'm deeply passionate about. But there's people's lives here, and it just seems so. It seems so childish to take it to that level. You can be mad all you want. Like you can be mad about Last of Us 2. You can say like I don't like this. I don't like that. Like I know.
Oh yeah, I'm fucking furious.
But you don't like oh I'm gonna find out where Neil Druckmann lives and I'm gonna send him a bomb or something. It's like Jesus Christ.
Yeah,
no.
honestly.
I will refer to him as Cuckman from now on, but I won't try
Yeah,
to
not a fan of that.
drop
But I
a
mean,
bomb
hey,
threat.
you're mad. That's it.
And I would never say it, you know, to his face or to his family. It's not a freaking lunatic.
But a lot of people are. It's like
Yeah.
that. This industry is full of like. I mean the
Get yourself
fandoms.
stuck there, Jacob.
I did. This has never happened before in the thousands of times I've played this game. I don't know if you were watching, Julian, but you know
Oh, I'm
the part
watching.
where you saw what happened?
Yep.
Yeah, I don't think I can get out of here.
No, you can't. You'd
This
have to
has
use
never
console.
happened before. Like I've gotten like been too slow and get like pushed back from it, but I've never fallen into it so perfectly. This is wild.
You don't have a lot of space to even get wedged
No,
in there. Like,
I
I'll
can't
do it.
move. I can't move. I can back up a little bit. I can do that.
Get them to patch
you-
this.
Yeah. Valve, your game's broken. Yeah, I'm gonna have to reload.
you're even getting like subliminal messages now, like
Oh,
textures
they're
just
bombing me.
flashing.
Oh, they're okay. Good. They're gonna kill me. Yay! I think. Anyways, what are we talking about?
Wow, what a sentence. They're gonna kill me. Yay.
Yeah. Only in
good.
video games.
Yeah.
Okay, what were we talking about?
Toxic.
About displeasure and toxic fandom.
Oh yeah. All the bad.
That's also new.
spooky
More
stuff.
new. It wasn't as big, like with the internet being as big as it is now.
Yeah,
and,
well,
like,
yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of that goes.
rallying.
Yeah.
That
a lot of that goes way
toxicity
beyond
is
just the
definitely
video game
born of the age
industry.
of social media.
Yeah, like that's just that was gonna happen no matter what. It happens in every fandom, every industry.
Like back when
uh,
you had to read the paper to get a movie critique, like yeah, sure, some critiques would be negative about something, but it was rarely so like inflamed.
Visceral, yeah. It was like it's like it gets like dangerous. I think that like there's like 410-esque kind of like just like there's like anger, so much anger behind it. Like people get violent, and that's where it gets kind of freaky. Like when my ex-girlfriend was working at BioWare, and I remember she was working on Andromeda, and like when it came out, I like talked to her about it, and oh my god, the things that were happening to like the people working there. It's like people getting all sorts of kinds of threats, like all kinds of threats, like sent to them by anonymous people. It's terrifying. Like imagine like you still like the thing is people that like take it out on the devs of all people, and it's sad because like, a lot of time the devs aren't the people who are making these kinds of decisions anyway. They're the things you don't
agree
like.
with us.
Yeah, the devs were just following the plan that they were given.
They're trying their best, and then like getting like I'm gonna fucking murder you or something, or like your family, or I'm gonna rape you and stuff. It's just like. Oh my goodness!
Like think even recently what happened at Ubisoft with that like bomb prank.
Yeah,
That's
that
just
was
like,
nuts.
you don't. That's not a prank. That's terrorism.
Yep.
Like it's
unacceptable.
straight up terrorism. It's like it helps nothing and no one really.
I had to like check up on some of my friends that day. That was really messed up.
Yeah.
And like I was afraid that was gonna sort of trend, especially with people being mad. I didn't even know what they were mad about in particular. For that
I think
to
people
happen.
are just mad. There's a lot of anger in 2021. Well, 2020
That's-
also, but like
Yeah.
I feel like there's a generalized climate of anger that a lot of people are failing to address properly because we don't even know where to start looking for like a clue of what's even going on that's making everything feel so fucked up. But like there's certainly like a huge socio-political debate that needs to happen. And
Yeah, I mean
like,
there was even riots this morning, right? So I guess
was
everything.
there? I wasn't aware.
Yeah,
I just
in
woke up not
Minnesota.
long
Oh, yeah.
ago.
this
Oh, is
morning
that
was,
what the pictures were? Okay, yeah.
Yeah, there were people vandalizing, rioting. There was police. It's pretty nuts. I don't know. Things could be better.
I remember even like a couple of years ago, like people rioting in the street and tossing rocks into window, and I'm like, what did that little store at the corner there do to you?
Yeah,
How
that's
does this store represent what be the enemy?
It's just
like-
chaotic, like explosions of anger and opportunists who are looking
Yeah.
to cause anarchy. But there's all sorts. It's a lot. It's just like it's sort of like an explosion of emotion after a huge buildup, and it's just like. And I think that if any, speaking of a media form that has a lot of passion behind it, it's like games. Even people you can see little snippets of it if you just play an online game for like League of Legends.
Oh my
and you just
god.
And you're like,
That's
oh, I wonder what the
so-
community is like. And you're like,
That's
okay.
solid. You have to
Let's
have
crank
thick
that up to
skin to
11.
play League because, like, wow. If you're new to the game and you start a game, like, at your lowest level, your account level 1, you're going to be paired with the absolute most trash that's available. And see, even my just talking about it, I'm becoming toxic. But, like, you're playing with the lowest ranking players possible. And even those guys, by exposition, will start to flame you if you're the one with the lowest output in your team. It's become ingrained in the culture of what it is to play League of Legends. Because all of these tryhards have this dream of making it big, and they're frustrated because they feel held back by the members of their teams that aren't necessarily pro players. And it's completely killing the option for people to just play to have fun.
Yeah, which is the point. So
Which is the point.
but that little sample of what you just explained is exactly like that on a larger scale. Because the community, the game community in general, harbors that kind of like emotion and potential resentment, and if you sort of blow that up to a larger proportion, then you get like Cyberpunk is actually kind of one of the best examples of like a worst case scenario, in my opinion. It's like a game with an enormous amount of hype, not delivering exactly what people would want. Like Fallout was big, but Fallout was still to some degree a niche for fans of like just RPGs. But CD Projekt Red sort of erupted in popularity after Witcher 3, and like people were like, "Oh, Cyberpunk is like going to be the return of Jesus Christ." So people got really, really hyped, myself included. And then, you know, even if they did deliver something better, I'm sure people would have still been mad. But the fact that they didn't even deliver exactly what people thought they were going to deliver, that's where like a lot of this potential eruption of emotion and anger and resentment comes out in terrifying ways. And like thank God the worst of it was the hacking of their data. Like I was worried it could have been worse than that.
It definitely could have been, and with the climate of tension there was in the social media about how bad the game was, I was starting to be scared that worse was gonna happen.
Yeah, that's one of the main issues and that's a new problem. Like again, like this, like we said, like this didn't exist like before, back on Super Nintendo. Like no one was like, oh, Yoshi's Island isn't as good as as the trailers made it out to be. Fuck Nintendo, I wanted them to die. Sega, Sonic is the way to go. Long live Sonic.
Yeah.
Like that wasn't the way it was. Like no one was, and if they were, then they were just sort of kept to themselves. Like they're in local, like a bar or something. It wasn't like the whole internet being like, come on, men. Let's attack! Like, we rally together and we fight CD Projekt Red at dawn. Like, that didn't...
I usually
exactly.
dislike to make these broad associations, but I feel like the most violent fandom when it comes to these kind of reactions are tied to violent games, because I remember when Sword and Shield launched. Not everybody who likes Pokemon liked Sword and Shield, but nobody threatened to go bomb Game Freak Studios for it. Nobody threatened to go kill the guy. They were just like, meh, I don't know. I don't feel like it's a good enough game to justify me buying it or justify me pumping 800 hours into it. But people remain civil about it because ultimately, like, it's just Pokemon. But I feel like these violent games, on behalf of the kind of emotions that they instill in us, like emotions like tension, like adrenaline, and everything that comes with it, tend to build this kind of anger more than something that would be like Stardew Valley or Animal Crossing. Like, these games are too friendly, too casual, too light for something as extreme as like death threats to come out of
watered
it.
down. I think it's not just the violence. I think it's because the community is watered down with casual. And I'm not saying that as a bad thing. I'm saying casual. The casuals are kind of like calming down. They're watering down the community with like a more calm approach. Whereas like if you have a rabid hardcore fan base and like most of the fans are just, regardless of how violent the game is, if you have just like older, like adult angry men, and you have like just a community of hardcore angry men, you're going to be more likely to end up with that kind of an explosion. Whereas Pokemon's probably going to have a lot of younger audience members too, and maybe even more women.
Yeah, a lot of the older men that would be playing Pokemon played for nostalgia's sake.
Yeah.
So we're kind of capable of doing that part of the work of saying like, yeah, but it's Pokemon, like, get over it.
Yeah, like I know I get the criticism. I think Nintendo in general somehow seems to avoid the same kind of rabid violence as the rest of the companies. Like Nintendo, people get mad at Nintendo, but it doesn't get the same kind of anger. And I find it surprising because Nintendo does do some like annoying like pandery stuff, or they do stuff that not necessarily pandery, but like they play it safe, or they kind of like what's the word I'm looking for? They like abuse the system to kind of make money of repeating the same sort of same old thing, as opposed to Zelda and Mario. Like Pokemon, for example, I find is kind of just like kind of
Pokemon
lackluster in terms of innovation.
Ultimately iterative.
Yeah, and that I'm not a huge fan of that, and I know that's a lot of the criticism. But people sort of they say that, and then that's kind of the end of it. It's not like, you know what, Game Freak, they're going down. I'm doxing them. Like, that doesn't happen.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's because they represent a more nostalgic part of our memories, so like people are just generally more okay with giving them a little
But
bit
you would
more
think
access.
that would even trigger them more because you're quote unquote ruining their childhood. It's a very
Right.
interesting point.
I think at this point it's because lowered expectations.
Maybe
We don't have the same expectations looking at a game. Like, if Mega Man came out with Mega Man X9, I would be hype. But if Mega Man X9 was garbage, I'd be like, okay, I'm just gonna go back to the ones that weren't garbage. No big deal. Like, I can
because the
play
last two were
more.
already
The last two were already kind of sketchy, so I'm already on kind of uneven footing here.
That's exactly it. Like, they already did that, so it's like, okay, well, our expectations are kind of hampered. But if it was a series with like hit after hit after hit, like if Witcher 4 came out and it was like a disaster, I think people would be really, really pissed.
Yeah. But if Mass Effect
yeah.
came
I mean,
out
yes,
and it was
but I'm a little
better
more-
than Andromeda, then people would be happy because we're like, yay, steps in the right direction, you know?
Yeah. Although after
Exactly.
Cyberpunk, my expectations for whatever they do next will be lower than they would have been otherwise. So
Fair.
I
I don't
want
know
to,
if
but-
anyone's exempt anymore. I don't know if there's any golden company that has never messed up anything.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it exists anymore. I think that's good. I think we shouldn't
Yeah.
hold any company up to an unfair standard.
Failure is someone who hasn't failed hasn't learned.
Well,
Exactly.
it also depends on what you mean, like, because there's a difference between like just a game not quite working and what's happened with Cyberpunk and what happened with some other big budget games, you know. But as far as like if we're talking about like any companies that just didn't betray your trust blatantly and still trying to make the games they've promised to make, one company I'll put up there is Obsidian. They've had some duds and they've had some games where you can argue, okay, it's not like the greatest thing since sliced bread, but they've never blatantly disappointed the way CD Projekt Red did with Cyberpunk, or Bethesda with Fallout, or BioWare with Mass Effect.
Well, it's a little subjective. I think, although I'm not one of them, I'm sure people were probably kind of displeased with Outer Worlds as a whole. Like, people didn't really feel like it delivered
No, but
that.
it doesn't like sour your opinion on the developer because it was something new, it was something they were trying. This kind of like
Yeah.
betrayal of trust can only really happen either with the insane amount of hype like of something like Cyberpunk, or with a loved franchise being thrown in the toilet. Outer Worlds had the benefit of being a new franchise with very little like hype around it coming before launch, so
True.
because yeah, I mean it's not the greatest RPG ever. It's definitely not even their greatest RPG, but I certainly wouldn't call it a failure, and definitely not any sort of betrayal of promises or trust. Now, if Outer Worlds 2 comes out with Microsoft's iron fist all over it and it sucks, then that would qualify. But I think there are plenty of developers that haven't like betrayed my trust as much as just maybe haven't made a game of that. Because to get that to the point where your trust is betrayed to the point we're talking about, there needs to be precedence for that by having had a game that really just like made them what they are. Like Fallout's Elder Scrolls with Bethesda, or BioWare with Mass Effect.
So if Elden Ring was like full of microtransactions and like
Oh yeah,
I
the worst
would
of betrayals.
completely
Elden Ring's the
crucify
perfect
From
actually,
Software.
that in general, another great example of a studio that has not betrayed my trust or even put out a bad game, except for at worst the B team game of Dark Souls 2, and even then I still love it, But yeah, if Elden Ring comes out and it's a shadow of the previous games, mechanically, and is filled with bullshit microtransactions and whatever else you can think up of to hurt my hopes and dreams, then yeah, that would be a fucking awful one.
Whatever other cruel twist of fate you have.
From
And
Software did the smart thing of failing before doing the right
Yeah,
thing, not
and-
after.
I don't want to give them a complete pass on it because it involved not making games for almost 2 decades, but Valve has never disappointed either. They
What
disappointed
about
just in the sense that they
Artifact?
haven't. What?
what about Artifact?
Well, I mean, that was. I can't even tell you because I've never even looked at it. That's
Well,
how
that's-
inconsequential it is to their library, in my opinion.
But
Like,
it,
their main games, the ones that take place in their universe, or the Half-Life, the Portals. Half-Life Alyx was the first game of that like that came out in 15 years, and by all accounts, it's still what you'd expect from a Valve game even after all this time.
my point is just that they're not immune to that kind of failure. Because I mean, Artifact did go free to play, and they dropped it. Like, it was something that, first of all, I think it was just, generally speaking, it's a strange move on their part. Like, they were trying to capitalize on the TCG fad.
Yeah.
But,
And that too,
but
it
didn't
was a
work.
creative risk, so I'm more willing to forgive something that's so out of their comfort zone. But if they made like a first-person shooter, whether it's Half-Life or something else, and it was just like Call of Duty, then that would be like, okay, what happened here?
Well, Counter Strike's basically Call of Duty, so
No, no.
I'm just joking. I was just trying to get you guys
okay,
to
that's it. It's settled.
do that.
Next week's podcast is a 3-hour discussion of the differences between Counter-Strike and Call of Duty.
No, please.
Oh wow.
I don't think we're gonna do 3
Oh,
hours.
God.
That's my punishment? Is that you're putting
Yeah.
me in the corner? You're like, how dare you make that comparison?
Yeah, yeah.
And if you can't make it next week, we'll postpone it. Don't worry.
Actually, I will be there next week.
Cool.
I'm going through some I'm trying to plan something and it's
Yeah.
working out horribly, but
Oh,
yeah,
no.
so I should. It's just I'm going through nightmarish bureaucratic nightmares all the time. Nightmarish nightmares. Yeah, I'm going through basically frustrating bureaucracy a lot.
Bureaucracy is the death of human life.
It's consistently the thing that drives me nuts. It's like the one thing that I always end up somehow going face to face with, and I love to kind of connect it actually in a funny way. I love how some games try to represent it. When I see bureaucracy being represented in a game, I'm so happy. Like in The Witcher, when you're in the Blood and Wine and you have to do the bank. Oh my god! I'm like,
Yeah.
yes, I hate this. It's so accurate. This is
Yeah.
exactly what it's like. I'm like, it's the worst thing ever, and it just captures it. I'm like, yes, that's exactly how annoying it is. I love it.
Yeah.
Well, I hate it, but I love how good they get it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The jokes are make it all worthwhile.
It's hard though because it's like you don't want to actually make the thing unfun either, but you want to
Yeah. That's why you got.
you want to make fun of it.
Yeah. Well, that quest you're talking about is perfect. It's like a short, few minutes, in and out, but a nice little social commentary on it.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite missions actually in
Yeah.
all of The Witcher 3. I just love it. I'm like, yes.
Yeah.
It's also a good change of pace, just
Yeah.
like looking at something different and like learning more about the lore and like it's just
Yeah.
it's a fun way to integrate that.
Yeah, and it's also a great indictment or a compliment of a game that one of your favorite quests in a game where you play a monster hunter has nothing to do with monsters or hunting.
It has to do with registering with a bank. It's the
Yeah.
best. That's my favorite part.
Yeah.
The part where you try to join a bank. Anyways, that's what it is. That's life though. That's definitely a cornerstone of being a human these days. So it's fine, but
It is what it is. as they say.
exactly.
All right. Well, anything else anyone wants to say, or related to the topic or not? Any closing chill remarks, or are we ready to shut her down?
Half-Life sucks. Half-Life sucks. Joe.
Hey.
Well, you
There
know
you
what they
go.
say
Don't
about people who
tolerate that
like
kind of talk.
Zelda? They're stupid.
Oh shit.
Shut the
Okay,
fuck.
Battle Royale right here.
Wow. And
Zelda
next week is
versus
actually just
Half-Life?
gonna be-
Everyone knows Skyward Sword is the best Zelda game.
Get out of here,
That's why
Jacob.
they're remastering it for
Never
full price.
return.
Yeah, right.
You've been exiled
yeah,
from Canada.
full price remasters.
I thought I'd get.
Sorry,
you
not a
with that one.
remaster. It's like a port, basically. It's,
Yeah. Yeah. I would like to see more Zelda ports this year. Now
Yeah,
that the Mario
Oracles.
35th anniversary is done, like
Even oracles.
I honestly, I don't. I feel like this whole thing has been my least favorite thing Nintendo's ever done. The way that they've approached all of this makes me really mad at them. I feel like it's so insulting. To like, first of all, Mario actually I think was less insulting, but the fact that they put a limited
Yeah.
date on it, I'm like, come on,
I
really?
was so upset.
yeah,
I think
You
it's
kind of
unnecessary.
force your clientele into buying something or
artificial
risk missing
inflation.
out on
I'm
it.
telling you,
I
they're just-
hate that.
Yeah.
It's holding your customer base hostage.
Yeah, it just feels very anti-consumer.
Yeah.
That and Skyward Sword for me is like even worse because they did the Mario thing at all. So it's like, oh well, you did 3 games before, even though only one of them was Wii, but it still came with 2 other great games. Now you're gonna do only 1 Wii game, and it's gonna be full price. It's just what I feel like that doesn't seem
Yeah,
right. to me.
that doesn't track, bud. Like, what's going on
It's-
here?
I don't get their math. I want to see their work. Like, I don't get it.
That's it. Just feels kind of I know people will defend it because Nintendo has like a pretty loyal fan base, but
You can say a rabbit
I'm a
fan.
Nintendo fan. I am a Nintendo fanboy. Like, if you ask me my favorite console of time, it was a Nintendo console. The favorite console I own now is a Nintendo console. Some of my favorite games were Nintendo games. Like, I'm more than willing to stick my neck out to help Nintendo, but on that one, they're fucking up big time.
it feels it. And the thing is, what worries me is that I feel like they're still going to have tons of people supporting it, and it'll just reinforce this.
Yeah.
And it's gonna keep pushing us to like I don't know like the thing is Nintendo already gets free passes on certain things that most companies don't, like the way that
Yeah.
their games never drop in price, first party games, or they barely drop in price ever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If there's ever a sale, it's gonna be like 10% on the digital store, and it's
Yeah.
gonna be like for a week. So
Yeah,
Exactly.
exactly.
get your game on, because
But that they get. I even give them a free pass on that. Like I'll usually just buy their games. I don't like it, but I'm like, you know what? I get it. Whatever. That's a Nintendo thing, and that's just the way it is, and we can't really change that. It's too set in stone. But to go further with like, if you don't buy the game by March 31st, you can't get it anymore. It's just like what? And it's not even a new game. Oh, if it was a new game, it'd be even stupider to me. But like,
if it was a new game, you can be damn sure I wouldn't be getting it.
But that happened already, technically, with Mario 35.
Yeah.
It was a downloadable game, and like they made a whole game.
Yeah, I
Now
have
it's
it
just-
on my Twitch.
But now it's like it's not supported anymore. You can't play it anymore online.
No, and the stupid thing about this is that Mario 35 is a game you're supposed to play with people.
Exactly.
So now the only people you can play with are the people who got it and who are still playing. So you're basically shotgunning in the knee. Forget the arrow in the knee. You're taking a shotgun to it now, and
So
just
why would you-
completely gimping your whole player base.
But for what reason either? It's like I don't even get the
Yeah,
reason. It was free. It was a free download for if you had Nintendo Online. So it's just why even do that? I don't get it. It just seems like that sort of thing plus the Skyward Sword, like the remasters for a full price game. It seems it's a bit insulting. Like I said, I feel like I'm being mistreated as a consumer and a fan of Nintendo.
Yeah, I dislike
doesn't
the way
feel right.
Nintendo's been approaching remakes like for a long time now. I don't know if you've played the Link's Awakening DX remake.
You mean like the cutesy one? Yeah, I have it. I played it.
You played it. You managed to
barely.
get to the end.
No,
Because I had
played
to
that.
stop playing. I had to stop playing a few minutes in because frame rate issues. I'm like, come on, you're first party developer for a game that's going to be launched on one console. You have no excuse.
Also, it's some of the most graphically demanding, so I do find that a bit strange. It'd be great if they could patch it.
I read into it just out of curiosity,
Mm-hmm.
and apparently it's garbage code. It's bad memory management.
Okay, could be a B team that worked on that then.
I think it was. But regardless, like you don't really have an excuse. Like you playtest your game, you have frame rate issues, you figure it out. Like it's you have the one console to develop for. Like at this point, you don't really have. And it's not just at launch there was issues. There was never a patch to fix it either.
Yeah, that's a bit worse, to be honest.
Like in the modern era of being able to patch out these things and fix these minor issues, there was absolutely no attempt made at fixing it.
Yeah, that's a little less forgivable. It's true. The deal is with that. I don't know why that happened.
Cash grab. Remakes are cash grab industry. Okay, it's banking on nostalgia 100%. 100%.
works.
And it works.
Or-
It works. I can't tell you how many copies of Mega Man X Collection I own, just because I play this game on any system I can have it on. Just it's nice to have. I know I can emulate almost all, if not all, of those games, but just for the sake of showing Nintendo, like I'm still interested in that franchise, I'd rather buy the game.
Okay. Well, I see. It's just I feel like the way things are going, I'm like, and even Link's Awakening at least was like a remake from the ground up,
Yeah.
whereas Skyward Sword, they're like, well,
They're just
it's
putting a
a game
fresh
where-
coat of paint on it, like a little bit of makeup. Not even.
and barely. It's just
Yeah.
like, yeah, the controls have been retrofitted, but it's like,
You don't need to use motion controls anymore.
which is good, but
But
I
there's
mean,
some
that's not-
mechanics of the game that are so meshed into it that it's just like I don't see why you wouldn't.
It's just, yeah, it's just a precedent that, now I'm a little concerned. That's all. Like, I don't think Nintendo is like, I trust them very much though with like a new Zelda, like Breath of the Wild 2. I trust
Oh,
I
yeah,
trust them
sure.
still. I trust them still with Mario Odyssey. They have yet to disappoint me with like mainline Mario, mainline Zelda. But yeah, I think that I don't think that's any excuse to not hold them accountable for anything. Like if they don't deserve to just get your money every time they release something, and I wish more people thought that way because like they need to be pushed to be better all the time, much like any other studio does. Like you don't have to like threaten them or anything, but I mean like literally just consider before you just drop all your money on Nintendo's games because they are expensive and you know,
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
they're
certainly
just as
not cheap.
expensive as the next game. Like,
Yeah, if you were giving me like a $40 remake, all right, no problem. I'll fucking pay out the mouth for like, and that's the thing that really sucks is that it's not like Nintendo comes out with shit games or anything. Like we want to play these games, which is why I think having the Switch, the online repository for like $20 a year is great to have old NES and Super Nintendo games. They're slowly adding more and more. But then at the same time, they'll turn around and they'll sell me like a Castlevania set for like $40. Well, why couldn't that have just been part of the Super Nintendo? You know what I mean? It's
Oh,
like
completely.
don't fucking cherry pick your best titles and then just throw the rest
Sell it
on
back to
free
us?
service. You know, like
I
come on.
think,
Fire Emblem.
but I think there's a,
Yeah.
I
Yes.
think there's a legal reason for this too. I think it's also because when it comes to some of these games, like Castlevania, like Mega Man, Nintendo doesn't own the rights.
Capcom,
It owns the
Konami.
exclusivity, but they don't own the rights. And if Capcom wants to release a anniversary collection of Resident Evil, then you can be absolutely certain that down the line, when we're having GameCube emulators on our Switch 3 or whatever it's going to be by then, like you can be sure that Resident Evil is going to be nowhere there because Capcom is going to be holding on to the rights like dead for rights. Like it's just not going to go anywhere.
But I mean, like between Skyward Sword and like Fire Emblem, the NES, the Shadow Dragon one, it's like it doesn't feel that's Nintendo first party, and it's just like
Yeah.
like you didn't have to charge $7. Like I mean, $7 isn't that much, whatever. But it's for an NES game, and they use the online free NES things, and it just doesn't feel right to do that.
Yeah,
to
they use the
resell for more.
popularity of some of those titles to justify like you paying to play them rather than just emulating and playing them.
And personally, I'm even. This is just more of a very personal take, but I am a little annoyed that like that game already got a remake on DS, and I was like, well, why not just make that?
Yeah,
like,
give me the
I would
original
be-
then.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, and that game's super hard to find, so I'm like, yeah, I would have totally bought that, please. But no, they're like, no, the original NES one. I'm like, what? Why is that? Why are you charging for that?
Yeah.
So it's a. I don't know, whatever. Like this is a business, I get it, and they'll do what they can to make money. They know what they can get away with, or I guess we'll see what the fans do when Skyward Sword comes out, for example. But I can only imagine that.
I
diehard
can
Zelda
already
fans-
tell you that it's gonna sell well because
yeah.
Skyward Sword had its for better or for worse. It had its diehards.
Well, Zelda in general, it's like Zelda. I mean, Dan, you're a Zelda fan too, so
Yeah,
it's,
of course. Like,
and
it's-
Louis, you like Zelda, so
Yeah, I love Zelda.
so it's like, yeah, we might not agree with what they're doing, but like, there's people who just don't give a fuck. They're like, oh man, Zelda, yeah, right to my veins, please, I don't care,
Yeah.
give me more.
I would say I'm like this for all of the Zelda games except Skyward Sword.
Okay, well,
Like,
I usually, if you tell me Zelda something, I'm gonna ask, wait, Skyward Sword Zelda, and then you go no, and then I'm listening to whatever
you
you
like
have
the
to
Philips
say.
CDI. You like the Philips CDI ones?
Oh
where
yeah,
it's-
man, those are like abominations, like in and of themselves. Like the disaster that they are makes them worth the watch of someone playing through it, just to see how bad, how jank things can get when they're put into the wrong hands.
Excuse me, princess. Is that the show or is that the game?
That's a game.
yeah, that was the show that you were thinking.
That was
Oh,
the
was the
show.
show?
Excuse me,
That-
princess.
I-
Yeah,
from
yeah,
the show?
yeah,
Because
yeah.
I'm pretty sure it was in one of the games too, or something along those lines.
There's a lot of bad stuff in both, so it's really
Oh,
it's
man,
really easy
yeah.
to mix them
Holy.
up.
Yeah.
One of the games has you playing as Zelda,
Yep,
which was
that's.
interesting.
Wait,
that
you
one
guys
Pokemon?
mean you don't play as Zelda all the time?
Oh man,
Sorry,
I, used to,
I don't have much to contribute to a Nintendo talk, so I just had to get my words in.
That's
No,
okay.
I mean that's a mistake I was doing when I was young, like for real.
Friends bought me an ice cream cake from Dairy Queen with a Wind Waker Wind Waker. I almost just made a mistake. Wind Waker link on it, and it says
Oh,
like, and it just says Zelda exclamation points, and I was like, I hate all of you guys.
Look, Zelda. Like,
part is you don't
Wind
know if
Waker is
someone's
the first
doing it
Zelda games
because
that I
they
was
don't
kind
know.
of on the fence about.
Or if they're
Well,
just
it was-
trolling you.
They were just trolling me.
Okay. But you can
Yeah, I
very
sure hope
easily,
so.
depending on the group of people, be like, I don't know if you're trolling me or if you actually think his name is Zelda.
yeah, exactly.
Why not just make a Legend of Link at this point?
I
Let's clear
mean,
it up,
honestly,
guys.
it is kind of. I mean, like there are some Zelda games that don't even really feature Zelda. Majora's Mask, for example. The
That's true.
Oracle of Anything
She
game.
appears. Zelda appears in Majora's Mask
In a
1,
cutscene, blah blah blah,
At
to
the
give you the
beginning,
ocarina, but she doesn't
and
matter.
and Zelda is the driving force behind both Oracle's games, in the sense that she's the one who sends Link on that quest.
I'm
So
pretty
she's
sure-
always involved in some way. Link meets with the sages once he's there, but
Right.
Is she in
no,
Minish Cap? Is she in Minish Cap? I think so.
I don't even know.
I
to be
don't
honest.
think so actually.
I know the king is. I don't know if she's there. I
I
remember
don't
the
think
king.
she is.
Legend of Link, the Minish Cap. Yeah, there we go.
Yeah.
I mean, she's not in Link's Awakening DX
Oh, that's true. But that's
because that all
because like in the
happens
dream.
in Fever Dream. Yeah.
Yeah, so that doesn't. Yeah, I guess that doesn't really count. But if we're trying to piece together the Zelda games, feels like it was like done after the fact. I don't think they initially intended for those games to be like connected.
It was once
And now-
they realized that they're like, hey, we could maybe tie all this together, and it would
The
be
Zelda
cool, but-
timeline is a myth created by the people.
Yeah.
Yeah, but Nintendo got on board with it. They're like, "Here's the Hyrule
Yeah.
Historia. We can prove it."
I mean, I've seen it done in many series and many games where it's just like, oh, that fan theory was actually cool. Let's bank on it.
Yep. It's like Ocarina of Time created a split timeline, so now we have a bunch of different Zelda games. Woo. That's fine. Whatever. Like, I don't really mind as long as we get more innovative, interesting games. It's okay. Like, I'm not critical of that.
Yeah.
To a certain extent, I can even dig very iterative titles. Like, I'm unapologetically a huge fan of Mega Man and Mega Man X, and like those games were about as iterative as they could be. Like, they would add maybe one mechanic per game or one like cool boss weapon that had a weird mechanic to it that was interesting. But aside from that, like Mega Man's always the same like puzzle type room solving thing, and Mega Man X is always these big like open areas where you can just like dash and go full force and just have fun with it. But ultimately, like the game doesn't reinvent itself from X1 to X6. There's like so little change that like you can say like, oh yeah, that game's iterative, and you'd be absolutely right. But is it a flaw of the game? Not necessarily, if that's what people like about that game. I'm okay with getting more of something that was good, even if that means a little progress was made. I just want the studios that produce these games to be open about the fact, like, look, we didn't try to reinvent the wheel. We just wanted to give more fun with the same old mechanics that everybody enjoyed.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, how much would you have paid for a Link to the Past 2?
I never played Link to the Past, so I can't.
Oh man, get on it because
I mean, you
bro.
got a Link Between Worlds. That's basically the past two.
Yeah, I guess, and I paid full price for it.
Yeah.
So like, you know, just good games, man. Just give us good games, and we'll play, and we'll speak good things of good games.
But you know what? I also have to say, and this is a bit blasphemous, I know, but like, even like the McDonald's games, which I call them, like the ones that are like the very mainstream, very popular, and the stuff that doesn't feel very innovative. While that may be the case, it's not like they're completely devoid of great content. Like, if you play like find some good examples, like Battlefield 1's campaign, super short, but like, you know what?
Yeah.
It was interesting. It had some great narrative moments, and it was like it did the best of what it had. Same with Assassin's Creed. I think Assassin's Creed is super contentious these days, but I think that like I played Valhalla, and while it's not groundbreaking necessarily, but like it does a lot of really cool, fun things, and it's engaging for many hours, and like it sort of maintains like a decent status quo with games, and like it may not push them forward as much as, you know, more innovative titles, but you know what, like it's not like there's nothing there. There's something there. It's just
No,
not.
I was actually enjoying Valhalla quite a bit before I had to stop playing because of
I love all the
quest line
new
progression.
Assassins. The modern trilogy are some of my favorite games.
Yeah, there's a lot there. The amount of writing, like even if not all of it is delivered with as consistent quality, lot of there's a lot of good like side stories, voice acting, and there's a lot there, and like you got to respect them for that. Like, so it's even the mainstream like popular games have something like Call of Duty. Call of Duty is like its own like genre at this point in terms of like online shooters. It's like a standard of competitive, like accessible competitive shooting games. That's been laid. Like the groundwork's been laid for that, and they keep pumping out games for it, kind of like a la Madden and FIFA. But like there's a demand, much like for the sports games.
Yep.
There's also campaigns which I haven't played since a long
that
time.
was the
but-
main reason I played Call of Duty games back back in their humble pre-modern beginnings.
I like the Modern Warfare 1, and I
Yeah,
even like
it's actually interesting that was the jumping off point, because that was 2007, which is right around that line most of us drew for the shift from old to modern. It was when Modern Warfare came out.
That's my first Call of Duty too. I bought it from Best Buy. I still have it in the
Was
cardboard
my
box.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5th Call of Duty?
Oh,
Yes,
you're
the 4th
counting,
Call
like,
of Duty was
big,
my 5th Call of Duty.
Big red.
I
big
had
red
Modern
mark.
Warfare 2 and pretty much
Yeah.
quit at it.
Call of Duty
Based on
1, Call of Duty 2, Call of Duty Finest Hour, Call of Duty 3, and Call of Duty Big Red 1. All
Isn't there
came out
like
in
a
2004.
offense? Not global offense. What am I thinking? There's like a shit. Hold on a second. I have
United
like this Call of
Offensive?
Duty. United Offensive. Thank you. Yes,
Yeah,
that
that's
one.
an expansion for the first one, so I'll count it as,
Okay.
as one. But yeah, I mean, its campaign is as long as modern Call of Duty campaigns are, so I guess you can count it as its own thing. Also had, still to this day, some of the most innovative or most intriguing multiplayer, because, you know, Call of Duty doesn't really do vehicles and stuff. Well, this one had it.
It's true. Wonder why they have they like Titanfall is like the futuristic Call of Duties are like Titanfall where you have like wall running and
Yeah.
stuff like that. But like vehicles, I feel that's more Battlefield's domain.
Yeah,
I guess maybe they don't.
I
wanna-
was just
don't
about
wanna
to
step
say
on
like
toes.
Yeah.
the reason they don't do it is because the minute they did, people were like, it's like Battlefield but not as good.
Yeah, they don't want to. Maybe they don't want to compete too much. That's the direct like
Well,
competitor. I
it's
think Battlefield
interesting
Call
though,
of Duty.
because when United Offensive came out, it was like the premiere of the premiere. I know it's weird to think of famous Call of Duties before the famous Call of Duties, but like United Offensive was not some like, oh, whatever. You know, Call of Duty wasn't some living under a rock before 4 came around.
Oh, of
It's just
course.
4 propelled it into the mainstream, but no, like 2, like its multiplayer, or sorry, United Offensive, its multiplayer was, I'd say till to this day, the best Call of Duty's multiplayer has ever been. If you're okay with, you know, not having the modern trappings, but like it was better than the original games, and it was better than 2, just because it, you know, had the vehicles. It also was the start of the kill streaks. In a
Oh,
way,
yeah,
like
kill
you basically had like they were very fixed. Like you can call in artillery, you can call in a tank, but yeah, you had that, and yeah, peak Call of Duty.
Like that had its place in industry's growth. So like it's easy to I think it's easy to hate on it because it's like I said, it's kind of like the McDonald's in the sense that it's like it's very prevalent. Like that's like the
Yeah.
big titan of the industry. But
Yeah, you know it's garbage, but it's the kind of garbage you want.
Well, that's
yeah,
the thing. Is
it-
it really even that much that it's garbage, as much as it's just like the same thing all the time? Because if you just take any Call of Duty game, remove it from all context of how many games came out before and after, and any preconceived notions, they are all incredibly solid shooting games with very tight controls and very
Oh, yeah, for
precise
sure.
aiming. Like, there's a reason why it's still popular, is because it is, for that kind of a multiplayer experience, that, you know, infantry focused, it's the best. And then you have
Yeah.
Battlefield for the bigger maps, vehicles focus, and then you have Counter-Strike for people who want to play games that require skill. And then but like every Call of Duty game, if it came out in a vacuum, would garner extreme amounts of attention. But now it's just we're so oversaturated that we, you know, call them shit now, even though they're not
Yeah,
necessarily
it's,
objectively worse. Well,
Yeah.
some of them are, like Ghost was pretty bad, but overall it's still the same game, and that's why it's still popular and still played at such a high level. All right. So,
Yeah.
we'll wrap it up here, or did anyone else? I feel
I
like
think
every
so.
time I asked the question, I had 15 minutes to the podcast.
Yeah. Right.
But yeah, if there's nothing else, then I guess that's where we'll end our discussion about the old and the new eras of gaming. I think it was fun.
Yeah.
yeah.
Does anyone have any thoughts about next week's topic?
How about next week's topic, eh?
instruction manuals. No,
Oh, man, the classics.
as much as I love them, I don't think that's enough to talk about for 3 hours.
I have one that could very well prove to be enough to talk about for 3 hours, depending on where opinions lie, and how we want to frame it, I guess. But we could do a PC versus console discussion.
Oh man, PC Master Race versus
Oh, yeah.
the console. Yeah. I mean, I love consoles, so.
Master Race advocate over here.
Well, it's really tough. Like, I could go either way on that one. Like, we can talk about that for sure. But like, that's I don't think I'm like, I have a strong allegiance either way on there.
All right, well, it's just a thought. If anyone else has other ideas, we'll discuss them on the group chat and figure out what we want to do.
Yeah, I'll think about it.
Yep. Just an idea for now. If we don't think of anything else, then we'll go with it. If we think,
I mean,
it's
it's certainly a subject we could approach.
yeah, definitely.
What is it, dog? Oh my god.
All right.
Well,
Well, good talk, boys.
Good talk. Good talk.
Yeah, it's
The dryness of my mouth attests to the level of discussion I partook in.
Yeah, mine too, quite a bit. I ran out of coffee like 5 minutes in, and I was like too lazy to just
Fuck,
get
I
up
don't
and
have
make
a-
Yeah,
another one.
exactly. Oh, it's too late.
Oh, I'm gonna stop this. Oops.
Window. See.
All right. I shall end
Done.
stream.
I've been watching